1745, and we're going to be playing some Hearts of Iron 4. Who would have thunk, of course. All right, let me check and make sure the interwebs are all getting this. Let me get the chat. I thought I was going to be starting a bit later than normal, but ended up along at a good pace here. Right. Okay. Well, we've got a lot of new changes. I have been out, and I know those who have been following have already heard all this and know this, but not everyone has, and some people will be watching this later. I burnt out on Hoi 4 with the mods and things. And a lot of my old friends, hello if any of you are around, oh, Hoi 4 is just arcade. Well, looking at it now, I don't think you could say it's arcade. Yeah, it's still not the sort, it's still the giant sort of men standing around kind of look. Yeah, I know we zoom out, we got something of a counter here, which is good, which is a compromise. But we've now got a lot of new features. I want to learn the base game before I start looking at mods and seeing what mods do. Hello, Soul the Civ guy. Good to have you here. Those that have been around a long time know that I developed a mod for Hearts of Iron Black Ice, or Hearts of Iron 3 Black Ice, called Third Reich Events, which was very popular. And I mean as in probably more than 50,000 downloads. No, not small. At least for a mod that was mostly done by me, not a large team. I had a few people that helped now and then, but 80-90% of the work was me. And what it really did was, Third Reich Events added mostly events to the game that affected the game's outcome definitely, but was also very much of an immersion, educational type mod. Yeah, and I do see it as educational. And looking at some of this stuff is actually maybe getting to want me to play, and mod, I should say. I don't know whether Hoi 4. I don't know whether I can find a general, like a Black Ice or something for Hoi 4 that I would want to mod on top of. There's very good reasons to mod on top of things and not just mod on the base game. But with railroads and other things, I know they've been there for a long time, but we now have these raids, which may be a bit overdone, I don't know. There's a lot to see. Hey, ZZ, it's been a little while. I've been doing well. I hope you're doing all right. So I've done sort of the opening, obviously it's January 1 still, just sort of the opening setup here. Got some stuff going. Let's increase the speed because there's not a whole lot to do right now. Quite remilitarize the Rhineland yet, but we can move up a little bit there. Finishing up a semester for my master's degree. I remember you were working on some of that. It's been really tough while working full time, but I'm almost there. Very good. And I know you were concerned about your job because of cuts and things. I guess from what I'm hearing, we still have it, which is good. I try to remember what's going on with people, though I don't fully remember everything. I know. Now, here's an interesting question. I don't know how accurate all of these men are. And right now it has free manpower of 1.29 million, and we have an army of 300,000. Yeah, very busy. We have lost quite a few people, actually, attrition from people leaving and not being able to hire. There's actually been 2 people fired as well, which shows how different working in the federal government has become. Yeah. Those who don't know, my dad spent his working career working for the Navy, for the Defense Department, as a Defense Department civilian employee. But one of his jobs, I mean, he did different jobs while working for the DoD. Did take him out on ship, where he, spent a few days out on ship. So not in the Navy, but and not like deployed overseas, but maybe like a week long or whatever, and maybe a bit shorter deployment out to sea. So, but yeah, to be laid off by the government back then was a very unlikely thing. Now, I know from because I knew some of his coworkers and a few rather well. There was definitely attrition, turnover, people wanting to move on to other, not working for the government, and it would take a hell of a lot to get fired for cause. Not and it wasn't just like poor performance reports that would get you fired. So yeah, if people are being fired for cause, well, okay, I don't, what that may mean, but if they're being laid off because of manpower, staffing, budget reasons, that would be a bit of a surprise. Okay, what I was sort of thinking on. One of the major things, which I sort of started with my mod, actually, and very much look at for this channel, is lessons from history, which is very different. And I know some people's language skills are maybe not terribly great, but as opposed to history lessons, the way you frame and use words in English. And I know in both cases in my group, it was firing for poor performance. Oh, well, that's good to hear. If they were actually poor performance and got fired, that's good to hear. I mean, maybe they'll learn. Well, maybe they were in the wrong job, needed to be fired, or maybe they just didn't have the right attitude and needs to learn the right attitude. Like get to work on time and do your work or something. Yeah, no, that's good to hear that the government is firing people for poor performance, unless they're my enemies, which we could say something like the woke. I feel bad for people getting fired. the woke, I'm happy to get them fired. Um, they can go get some uh, fruit picking job or something if that kind of thing. But and so and this and even English as first language, I might not always get the difference when I say lessons from history as opposed to history lessons. History lessons are, to me, what happened on a particular date to a particular person. You know, oh hey, Pearl Harbor um, happened, and here's all the details of December 7th, 1941. Blah 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 blah. Fascinating stuff, good stuff. Here's the lesson of Pearl Harbor is, and there's can be many lessons, is hey, if you deploy your fleet out into harbor way out in the middle of the Pacific, aggressively towards your enemy, your potential opponent, no, you're not yet enemy, becomes that obviously, but deploy your fleet way out there and you don't, or it is provocative because that nation feels under threat and you need to do a better job protecting it. Something like they could have done with not a whole lot of effort. I mean, it would take some physical effort, but not a huge budgetary effort. Would be to put torpedo nets around the ships. They had submarine nets out at the mouth of Pearl Harbor. Pearl Harbor has a very narrow mouth to get in and out. Um, had the Japanese been able to sink a ship in the mouth of Pearl Harbor, um, they could have shut that harbor down potentially. Um, depends exactly where and what, but it's not like a big open mouth port like many out there. Um, so so lessons from history are things that we can take away and use in the future. Um, and I don't think people pay attention to that enough. I do think history repeats itself. I know people want to like, no, no, it rhymes. No, it repeats itself. Up until 1933, Germany had not broken a major element of the Versailles Treaty in a significant way. Qualifying, lots of qualifiers there, of course. Their army was supposedly, capped at 100,000, and that was roughly what it was. I think they were cheating there. Now, there was whole huge programs done by the government to arm militia groups that were, shall we say, center right. So at times, the SA were part of this program. And they, and I say major way and whatever, they were, hiding weapons from the Versailles inspection teams, etc., that were to be given out to these different militia groups if Germany was attacked. But between 1933 and 1936, we start to see major violations in it, including this number here, like the 300,000 more. But if you put in the militia groups, the SA, because they are the major militia group by 1936, there are only two others that I can detect. I say that because I don't claim to know everything. The other two are the German Veterans Organization. And I'm not talking. Well, I'm sort of lumping in the NSKK, the SS, the Allgemeine, or even if it depends on when you're looking at the Waffen SS. Those kind of, those I'm lumping all in with the SA, the various Nazi organization, the core. There was a German veterans organization that the Nazis sort of took over, and then there was a sub that the Nazis never were able to take over, veterans organization. That was a very small one, relatively speaking, of the um, uh, veterans organizations for those that served in the colonies, particularly, of course, Tanganyika. So, and that is where you get that million man. The SA were huge, and they get smaller in a way because a lot of their members are drafted into the army. So, but from even the manpower, but you have violations. Hey, Kronos, good to see you here live. He's often posting in our Discord um, server, so shout out to those there. That lots of interesting stuff there. Um, they start, especially expanding the army. They start breaking the Versailles Treaty, sometimes in covert ways. Things like the Panzerschiff, or as I think it was the British that named them, the pocket battleships. Um, we're all like, oh, hey, they only have, I don't know, 100,000 tons or whatever the thing. They're sort of kind of within treaty limits, but no, anybody with any real knowledge knows that they've broken that. And when they lay down something like the Bismarck, that doesn't come out until later, I believe, than this point. But they're breaking those treaties, and they formed the Luftwaffe. Though even early on, it's it exists. They're flying around. They've got uniforms. Goering's in charge of it, but is it just a flying association or some sort of civil government, non-military um, organization of some sort that isn't military, but flies bombers and fighters? They actually claim that some of the early bomber types that are fairly small in bulk um, are mail planes to drop mail, to fly over, to fly from Dresden to Leipzig and just zip over here, like same day kind of delivery kind of thing, in that they take off, fly over here, maybe drop a few sacks of mail, and then fly back without having to take the trouble to land, or quickly land and kick them out the air, the bags of mail out the airplane, and quickly hand up a few more bags and fly back. And they do some of this camouflage stuff, but everybody's knowing that. Wait, why does it say War Thunder? I don't know why it says War Thunder, because I made a mistake, probably. Oh, boy, I'm setting this up. Thank you for pointing that out. Let me see if I can correct this. Okay, yes, it does say War Thunder. Let me... Oh, this is what happens when I start a little early and don't get all my ducks in a row. Get a step. Thank you for letting me know I messed this up. That's maybe why we're not going to have too many viewers today. But we will correct this. I know how to do this. Add a new thumbnail made up for this. Paste. Do the thumbnail here for this instead of shutting this down and restarting. Thumbnail. Okay. Yes, thank you, Kronos. Everyone's looking out after me. Yes, that's very good. Save button, which should update that. Save. Save what? I don't know if I can change the game there. Let's go over to Twitch. Edit. And I do the extra work to try to make everything good. Get things going, and then I make a big mistake like that and like misnaming it. Dating, okay. There we go. Now it's changed. Thanks, Kronos. And I don't have to change what the game we're playing is, but at least it has Hearts of Iron. Right, there we go. Cancel. We'll get back to this. Right, so lessons from history, back to that. Okay, so Germany is breaking this, and here we're about ready to remilitarize the Rhineland. That is a major, major violation of the Versailles Treaty. Okay. Now, what lessons can we learn from this? And I started out, and this little thing is, why didn't they? And it's something that we can look in. Why didn't win some of these earlier ones? But let's just stick with what we have here right now, in that the going to be remilitarizing the Rhineland. Before this, they had kicked the French out of the Saarland, which is a smaller area here. Kicked the French military out without remilitarizing it. But right, yes, okay, good. So, and it could just, and the why they didn't. It could be that they didn't learn historical lessons, or the there wasn't enough historical lessons out there to learn from could be that, because we could say something like the Versailles Treaty and the way it was done was unprecedented, a term that I think the Obama administration and the really loved using. But the the whole Versailles Treaty mechanism was unprecedented in world history. Though you could look at the Concert of Europe, but they were doing even bigger things there. I mean, they were chopping up countries and creating countries and whatnot at the Concert of Europe. Sort of doing it, I guess, with Austria or the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe you could look at Metternich's Concert of Europe as a lesson from history there, with the 100 Days of Napoleon coming back as part of it. And they didn't learn that if you have an aggressive nation, and we could argue over whether, and I really can't answer it just exactly what, should you have should you have, trying to look for the right word, should you have categorized by 1936, obviously by 1942, obviously Nazi Germany is an aggressive nation to everybody. Everybody knows that by that point. But in 1936, is it an aggressive nation, or is it just a nation trying to restore something of its status, shall we say? Not necessarily, but is it trying to, it's already squawking about Danzig in 1936. Why, and Czechoslovakia's army is pretty big, pretty strong in 1936. Poland is doing its best to be pretty strong. And definitely those two combined have a larger military in 1936 than the German military, at least the 300,000. We can talk about the SA and all those other organizations. So why didn't they, along with the French and maybe the British, but definitely the French because they're on the borders here, react in a military way to remilitarizing the Rhineland? And we all know that most people, at least if you listen to the media, hate Trump. And that the Republicans are going to lose the midterm elections because Trump gas prices have gone up so much. I don't think they've gone up to what that was under the Biden administration, but it does also vary where you are in the United States. It's different prices in different parts, and that's going to do it. That's going to sink his administration, because as soon as he loses the midterms, they're going to impeach him and convict him in the Senate, and he's going to be in prison. And of course, all the Europeans just hate Trump. The American Pope, the U.S. American Pope, the previous one was American too, but he was, from South America, has condemned all violence. When people shout who they are, okay, When people shout who they are, believe them, okay? This isn't a believe all women, or when somebody says, I was there at Gettysburg or something. You don't have to believe what they say. But when they say who they are, if you know what I mean, if they shout things like, this is a good one, globalize the intifada, and then you get a lot of BLM and other leftist types in America and other places that chant this along. Do they know what the intifada, the intifada? Am I saying that right? No. Which is basically kill all Jews, right? Because that's what they're talking about in Israel is a violent struggle against the Jews, and you're globalizing it. So you're no longer being anti-Israel, but not anti-Jewish. No, you're just being anti-Jewish, right? And probably anti-Christian and anti-atheist and anything that isn't an intifada. That's right. Thank you, folk. Good to see you here. Intifada. And so believe these people in when they say who they are. And when they say death to America, that doesn't mean that tomorrow all the Iranians who could are going to get on some ship and try to sail that, or, steam or whatever, a ship across the Atlantic and land and start killing Americans. They mean it as a goal, as an objective, as a desire. And you should believe them, okay? This is a lesson from history. Do not think your worldview, I was going to say your rationality, no, but your worldview, like, oh, they would never do that. Just think it would destroy their country. It would get bombed into the Stone Age. Well, they may not believe it'll get bombed into the Stone Age, or they may not care if it gets bombed into the Stone Age, like we're seeing what's happened right now with Iran. So when they say who they are, believe them. This is a lesson from history. So Trump, who knew that he could do nothing versus Iran, and Iran was going to do nothing for the next 2.5 years of any significance. It just wasn't. Okay. Now, he's risking a lot. And you listen to so many of these people on the left that just say Trump is stupid, Trump is dumb. I've heard from a bunch of, I'm just watching YouTube videos, including Carl Benjamin's, or Sargon of Akkad, whatever you want to call him, some of his news channel and some of his commentators on it, that talk about how stupid it was for Trump to do that Greenland thing, and it's destroyed the Europe's rights alliance with Trump and all this other stuff. Now, Trump never said he was going to invade Greenland. Now, he was asked about Greenland, and trust me, sometimes somebody, maybe a name you've never heard of, maybe the Carolyn Levitt, the spokesperson for Trump, will go to some sort of friendly reporter. Well, why don't you ask the president about X? No, I don't mean Twitter. I mean just, some sort of thing. Ah, okay. Not like feeding them the exact question. And this way, it can be that Trump is responding to a question and not um, trying to make a speech. So I was just responding to some question. And he's asked, in the flying through the air press conference after we invited President Maduro to the United States to go to court because we wanted President Maduro in a court. Now you can believe legitimately that U.S. law shouldn't I'm just seeing something here. This should be here. No, it should be here. There. U.S. law shouldn't pertain to into other countries, but it's a legalistic thing, sure, as opposed to a power thing. But we did have a legal because Maduro was under indictment in the United States, so it wasn't just Trump all of a sudden desiring to do this thing. There was a court system that before Trump becomes president, at least before this presidency, I don't know how far back he was indicted, but before he becomes in the second term, indicts Maduro. Yeah. And we'll get back to playing here very shortly. Is asked about Greenland. And he says we must get it by whatever means, And so people put 1 and 1 together and come up with 2, when maybe they shouldn't even be put together. Military invasion and Greenland. Now, Trump didn't immediately come out and deny it. Now, why did he do this? Was it just Trump's big mouth? Ramblings on an airplane? Maybe. I don't know. Maybe it was, here, look at my right hand, my right hand, my right hand, like a magician's trick, while his left hand was doing something else. Maybe he was willing to burn his relationship with Europe, with NATO, because he felt compelled to stop Iran from getting a nuclear weapon. Maybe it's as simple as that. Because you can Trump, and I know that there's a lot of people that millions of people listen to, whether it's in the news media or somebody like Mark Hamill or whoever else out there that will say Trump is dumb, Trump is stupid. Trump is not dumb. Trump is not stupid. To think Trump is dumb or stupid means that he's constantly slipping on banana peels, but that's keeping him from being smashed by the piano falling off of the building, if you know what I mean. Think of a cartoon. Walking down, oh, damn it, I slipped on a banana peel, but then right in front of him, a piano crashes down and goes, oh, well, damn it. So either he, is dumb and the luckiest person ever alive, or he's smart. Now, I'm not saying he's the smartest person in the world or even the smartest person in the room. A good, smart person can have brilliant people around him feeding very good ideas, but he's picking up there. Hello there. Where are you from? Hello, Cat Kong Crack. I am from the United States. If you can't tell by my accent. And so Trump is not dumb. Now, is he always playing 4D chess? I don't know. I don't know. So the lesson from one of the many, many lessons from World War II is that when they tell you who they are, and then starting to react or act aggressively, don't wait until they are ready to attack you. Deal with them. How many million Frenchmen, Czechoslovaks, and Poland's Polish people, would have died in a 1936 invasion of Germany. I don't even think 1,000,000. I'm from the country you're playing. Ah, you're from Germany. Yes, cool. So, I'm sure a lot of Germans would have been killed, but probably a hell of a lot less than were actually killed in World War II. Now, the body counts in Czechoslovakia may not be terribly high, but the body counts in Poland are very high. Not just in combat, and France are pretty high too. Not in the Western Europe is not as as high as the body counts out here in the East. But Germany could have been taken out before it had its submarine fleets, before it had its huge Luftwaffe, before it had its tank programs, that they're running around with just Panzer Is. Right now, in 1936, they're basically just introducing. Let's come over here, to here. They're just basically introducing the Panzer II in 1936 into production. So, and I don't know how many like R-35s France would have had, but it would have a bunch of tanks still. So, that's sort of the takeaway, because what prompted me was looking here, all these units down here in the in Pomerania, or whatever you want to call this, down here that could easily be cut off, and it's not just from Poland, it's also from Czechoslovakia. And the German army is just not at this point capable of defending Germany. They might be very capable of fighting, but defending the territory? No, not big enough. Not big enough at all. So we're going pretty fast here. I want to, now that we're no longer pontificating. No, it was not possible because the Allies had other problems in their colonies and had not the capability to go to another war. Okay, you're new here, so you don't know what are a couple of my maxims, and you're not entirely wrong in what you're saying. Cat con crack. Politics is perception, and warfare is a political act. So warfare, ergo, is also perception as opposed to reality. France did not have that many problems with its colonies. France had a major problem because it's devastated by World War I in a population. Its population is gutted of males from World War I. I'm not even worrying about, in 1936, I'm not even worried about having the British join. But Poland, and what I'm seeing this as in 1936, yeah, France. Now, of course, when I do want to step back, is they may have perceived themselves as not being able to go to war. But in 1936, France's military is much more developed than Germany's is. Poland and Czechoslovakia combined, not just as one of them, but combined, have a larger army than Germany. So it doesn't take, in 1936, much for France to react to the Rhineland occupation. We'll do this since we're talking about it. The Rhineland occupation doesn't take a whole lot. And some aggressive moves by Poland in 1936, because I don't think, again, in 1936, the Soviet Union is really ready to invade Poland. I'm not saying pull all troops away from the Soviet border. And probably Romania would have jumped into, because in 1936, I believe, Romania sends a mission that first goes to France to try to get an alliance with France. And then when that's not working out, and I think it was already sort of pre-planned, because I think they wanted both in the alliance. They head off to Britain to try to get Britain in an alliance. And I agree with France looking at, and they're mainly looking at this in 1936 as not as an anti-German alliance, but an anti-Soviet alliance. That France is not really emotionally, as a nation, ready to go to war over Romania. Meaning the French people are not going to cheerfully get on trains and go across Italy, go across Yugoslavia, and, go fight in Romania. Britain, geographically, whether they are emotionally or not, but geographically are not going to be able to support, because they don't have any size. Their army is just a fraction of the French army, like 10%, 20%. Now, the army in Britain is, even in 36, is pretty well equipped. It's a modern army. But it's small. But it's definitely not able to deploy and whatnot. And Britain's big power in 1936, of course, is the Navy, and against Russia, there's not much the Navy can do. What are they going to do? Try to sail in and bombard Leningrad or blockade Murmansk? Yeah, okay, they can blockade Murmansk, maybe. But Britain's Navy is not capable of hanging out here for long. They're not like the U.S. The U.S. Navy, even in World War I, is starting to do underway replenishment, which the English aren't. The French aren't, as far as I know. And if you don't know what underway replenishment is, it's while you're at sea, ships will come up and, send food and fuel over to the warships, keep them away. Britain has bases all over the world, so it's planning on using them for resupply. They're not planning on doing it underway. America does have a few bases around at the time, but they're only out in the Pacific. And World War I, we may need to have a Navy that's out there longer. So Britain, because of this distance, and it is pretty far distance, isn't going to be able to constantly hang out here with a large force. And their submarines, it's going to be short-term in and out. So, and of course, you'd still be able to, what are the British going to, leave Hong Kong and hang out here all day? Yeah. So Britain isn't really going to be the nation that helps it. Now, Britain could have supported, if France was emotionally ready to, defend Romania from communism. Now, of course, quarter or somewhere between 10 and 25% of the French population was and is still today communist. So, they of course don't want to protect Romania from the Soviets. But the rest here, if France was going to get involved, Britain could help on the edges. But if Poland and Czechoslovakia go to war, I could see Romania sending in some forces there, not most of their army because they're still worried about the Soviet Union, but they would be there as part of the alliance that if the Soviets invade Poland while they're fighting Germany, that they are already part of um, the alliance group and would fight. So the French, particularly, but it may be the Poles and the Czechs too, might have thought they had too many other problems to go to another war. But I'm going to say that is um, one of the lessons from World War II is you just don't want to wait until your enemy's ready. And you can also look at, should you be ready to go to war right now? France could have attacked, yes, but costly. Even if we don't look at the internal problems, Germany didn't do so much bad stuff that it was worth to declare war. Germany just started with the Jews after the war started. Well, if you're talking about the final solution, yes, after the war starts. But Kristallnacht is in 1936. Oh no, 38. Sorry, 38. You have the 36 Olympics that, especially in cities where the Olympics are being held, both down here for the Winter Olympics, and then later up in the Berlin Olympics, they remove a lot of the public, Jews not welcome here signs for the international tourists. But they're already pushing down. But yeah, the really bad stuff. Yeah, well, this is what I'm saying is I am trying to teach the lesson from history and we could look at Russia. Obama is president of the United States. Obama is no, okay. Let's go back. Let's go back one more. George Bush the Younger is president of the United States. There is a local enclave of rebels here, and there's a local enclave of rebels somewhere out here, I think it is, in Georgia. Georgia is an internationally recognized independent country. Putin's Russia invades Georgia and cuts it in half. Oh, well, we don't have Arno here yet. Display the bot. Twitch. Comes in and cuts Georgia in two. Why is Georgia nominally an independent country now? Now the people are generally wanting to join the EU or the Western world, however you want to say that. And I understand why they want to join the EU, not because they think the EU is so great, but as a protection element from being conquered by Russia. But the corrupt government that's got into power is put in by the Russians because their earlier plan doesn't work when they cut them in two. What happens is threats from Bush, and Bush deploys a U.S. Navy ship or two or whatever it was to the Black Sea. And that gets Russia to withdraw to the positions prior to their invasion. I think the enclave still exists in Georgia to this day. Okay. So Bush reacts to the Russian invasion of Georgia in such a way that the Russians back down. When Putin's Russia invades and conquers Crimea, yeah, I think mostly without a shot being fired, but they invade and take Crimea. And Obama sends a strongly worded message, if I remember all this correctly. And hey, what Jan talking about over on the Discord? Doesn't need to be a contest. Oh, hey, contests are cool, Jan. See, Kronos is my better friend because he let me know first, of course, Jan, if you're watching any of this. But, and part of the strongly worded message is to sanction a few of the oligarchs or something in Russia. And Europe's main response is, let's buy more energy from Russia and complete some pipelines from Russia. They're not really going to go to real war over anything. And since you didn't, they could have embargoed at that moment. They could have put 100% embargo on Russia. The U.S. and the EU could say no trades with Russia or Belarus or any other Russian puppets. Not a blockade, just an embargo. We're not going to sell anything to Russia. We're not going to buy anything from Russia. And this winter in Berlin, we're going to have no heat. No heat. Because we're going green, we're getting rid of our nuclear power plants, and we won't be able to have any natural gas quickly enough from the U.S. to power our things. And we're getting rid of all of our coal because coal is evil. We'd rather have our people freeze. But we're going to do that instead of continue to expand our trade with Russia. You could say the NATO or European NATO wasn't ready to go to war with Russia, and the U.S. under Obama wasn't going to go to war over Crimea with Russia. And you'd probably be very correct on both of those statements. But there were serious things they could do to try to get the Russians to withdraw from Sevastopol. And you don't even have to go to like 100% blockade against embargo against Russia. You could just, do a withdraw from some of the pipeline deals and some of that other stuff. But now, and that would have been costly. Just think how costly that would have been. The whole connected with Russian stuff, Germany's main income trade. We can't just stop trade like the U.S. Well, that's false. You can just stop trade. But what is the cost to Europe for the Ukraine war now? How costly has that been? They finally did learn the lesson that if you don't do something, the aggression isn't going to stop. Okay? The aggression isn't going to stop if you don't do anything. And how else to put it? We don't know what the cost is going to be. Because, in, let's just say, in 20 years from today, is Germany going to be importing Russian energy, oil, natural gas, whatever, while German tanks are shooting at Russian tanks somewhere in Poland? Are they going to keep doing that when fighting breaks out? And somebody recently said, well, isn't Russia pretty much done now? Europe doesn't have to worry about Russia. Aren't they pretty much done now? Yeah, Germany was pretty much done in 1918. Right about 20 years, maybe 21 years later, they start the Second World War. So Russia, if it were to get peace out tomorrow, 20 years from now, they may be having an army the size that at the peak of the Soviet Union. Hey, Arno, good to see you here. So, I don't think next year Russia's going to be, bursting out of Kaliningrad and driving across Poland heading for Berlin. No. But we are definitely looking at potential serious conflicts in the future. And what is the cost going to be? Okay, and oh boy, I am forgetting who it was, but one of the top German generals in the Berlin staff. During the Munich crisis in 1938, now this is 2 years later than here, or 2 years plus, communicates to the British that you should stand up to Hitler and go to war over the Sudetenland. And all you have to do is now whether this would have happened this way or not, that's another question, but this is what is communicated, and I believe the reports to the British, that all you have to do is do a serious offensive into Germany, and the German army will revolt and get rid of the Nazis. So please do this, and we'll get rid of the Nazis. Sure, we're going to have, 10,000, 20,000 dead Germans, but we'll get rid of the Nazis at this point. We'll save it from a real major war. Okay? That's in 38. In 36, Germany's weaker. Hitler's weaker. It's right around, what is it? I think it's a bit later in 36, but it's right around now that Germany reintroduces conscription. Okay? And sorry, I don't have and hello Arno over on that. I'll get to you, Khan, I'll get to your comment in just a moment. Hitler is, his biggest fear is the German army. Until he gets mass conscription and there's large numbers of the SA in the German army. Okay. So, had you in 1936, before this really gets entrenched, had you done that aggressive invasion, I don't think the German army is going to fight to the bitter end. You're not going to have a 1938 Battle of Berlin that looks like the 1945 Battle of Berlin. I think that in 1936, and then Hitler is very afraid in 1939 and 1940 of the German populace because he gets them into a major war. He is afraid. So they don't do rationing in the start of this. It is only with victory in Paris in mid 1940 that Hitler now feels secure. Because if you look at film footage of that victory parade in Berlin, it is massive. I think there's more than 1 million people at that parade, but I obviously haven't counted the crowd size. But it is massive. And that, it is only in 1940, after taking of Paris and the piecing out of the French, that secures popular support for Hitler. Okay. So had in 1936 there had been a massive reaction to the remilitarization of the Rhineland, I think the Hitler regime would have fallen. Okay. And so, okay, let me address did you guys invade random countries around the world? Should we stop trade with you? What random countries have the U.S. invaded? I'm presuming you're talking under Trump. Name me a country, random U.S. country that we've invaded. Oh, Venezuela? And you weren't here maybe before when I was talking about it. The president of Venezuela was under indictment in a federal court in New York for a long time. I don't know if it was I think it was under the Biden administration, but correct me if I'm wrong under that. And Venezuela was committing acts of war by sending in drugs and insurgents into the United States. So Venezuela was doing de facto acts of war. And all we did was snatch up the president. Oh, yeah, we got the first lady too, and we had to kill a few bodyguards. What other country have we invaded? Oh, bombed Iran? 444 fucking days. They held the U.S. embassy staff, the Revolutionary Guards of Iran. They have been at war with us since then. The Marine barracks, that was an Iranian job in Beirut. The USS Cole, that was put a big hole in it, blew it, killed some soldiers out when it was in the Aden Harbor. That was an Iranian job. All of the Iranian support for particularly the southern insurgents, the Shiites in Iraq, that was acts of war against the U.S. The Houthis, which attacked U.S. ships, including warships as well as U.S. flagships in the Red Sea, that was all Iran. While the major part of the Houthis' attack, there was an Iranian civilian ship, supposedly civilian ship, was doing a figure eight out here for months. Civilian ships don't do figure eights out here for months if they're legitimate. That was an intel ship that was sending information to the Houthis about attack this ship, and here it is. So they were doing all that. Iran has been attacking the U.S. since 1979. We may not have been at war with them, but they were at war with us. Their government said death to America. That is equivalent to a declaration of war. And since 1979, the United States has not had diplomatic representation with the Iranian Revolutionary Government. So that is also, if if not an actual de facto war, that is a not peace. It is standard international convention, when you're at peace, is to have diplomatic representation between the two countries. We have not had that with Iran since 1979. What random countries? Okay, and the Canada, Greenland stuff, I addressed some of that earlier, that I think that was misdirection after the Maduro invasion to keep people from, including governments, from paying attention to the military buildup that was planned on Iran. Keep everybody caught, look at the right hand while the magician does something with the left hand. I think that's what it was. Okay, yes, just catching up on that. And we did kind of stop trade one of the pipelines and provide so much we can survive until we have other people to. Yeah, I know, you're working at it. Says the U.S., the same guy who told people that the country had weapons of mass destruction, and guess they had nothing. And why did you take? I mean, now U.S. I don't know exactly what you're referring to with the Venezuelan oil. The bulk. There were a few other international companies, but the bulk, the great majority of the equipment used for the Venezuelan oil was owned by American companies. They had purchased and were paying fees over to the Venezuelan government to extract the oil. It was all agreed upon mutually without gunboat diplomacy until Hugo Chavez comes in and nationalizes and steals all of the assets that the American has and does not repay them for it. We are just collecting and getting our oil fields back that we had built. We built those oil fields. There's something like 1,000 or something Venezuelans that, was it one of the American oil companies that are still employed by the American oil companies. They've just employed outside of Venezuela because they got out and they stayed employed by the oil companies, and they're working, I don't know, in the Gulf or in America or whatever, that they've still been employed. Because these are Venezuelans that, whatever the oil companies were. So we are getting our oil back. Oh, Venezuela will get its cut after it pays back all that it stole from us. So it's paying back what it's stealing from us, what it stole from us. And, okay, weapons of mass destruction. Colin Powell, and I have a family connection to him. Colin Powell did not lie. He did not lie to the world at that UN meeting about weapons of mass destruction. But he was wrong. There is difference between lying and being wrong. I saw a great documentary on it. An Iraqi government scientist defects from Iraq. And he tells the CIA or one of the other three-letter agencies a big story. And this is exactly what the CIA wants to hear. They want to hear that. So they don't check up on it. They believe the story because it fits the narrative. And so the CIA tells Colin Powell and the people in the White House that the Iraqis have weapons of mass destruction. And they just believed it. It's like all those senators believed the CIA that, oh, Trump is a Putin puppet. Trump goes to Russia to get prostitutes to pee on him. They believe that shit. When he wasn't even in Russia at the time when they said it happened, and Trump is a germaphobe, if you don't know. He doesn't drink alcohol, he's a germaphobe, he wouldn't do anything like that. And they believe this stuff because the CIA told them so. It wasn't true. And now we're finding out just how they were lied to them, to the senators. So Colin Powell believed the weapons of mass destruction. And it has also come out Saddam Hussein wanted the U.S. to believe that there was weapons of mass destruction because he didn't think he was going to be attacked by the U.S., but was more afraid of Iran. So if he could keep that perception that they have them, instead of like letting any of the, go wherever you want, inspect. No, he was playing games because he was more afraid of Iran than he was of the U.S. So, yes. And do you know why they hate you guys in the U.S., Middle East? They say death to America because nearly every war in the area, U.S. has a part in it. How did the U.S. have a part in 1948? In any of the Arab-Israeli wars? Please tell me that. How did the U.S. have... Oh, they supplied weapons to Israel. So? That's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Only a few did says, oh yeah, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. Let's forget about it. And what about the random trade war Trump does against Europe and China? So? What about the trade war that Europe has against the U.S. for how many generations now? That's silly. Worry about trade war. So? Trade policies. Who cares? That's just silly. Iraq did have at least some WMDs. They used them on the Kurds and didn't have very much, so they also the amount was overstated. Yes, Dutovlich. Yes. Oh, and we have the Iraqis who agreed to a peace. Yes, there was a gun literally fucking at their heads, basically, when they signed after the first, what we call the Gulf War, when they invaded Kuwait and we kicked them out. There were no fly zones that we were patrolling in the north and the south, and the Iraqis not just painted the aircraft that were flying, the fighter patrol aircraft that were flying with radar, but actually fired missiles at it. I think they may have taken down just one or two aircraft, but I don't think they killed anybody. But that's an act of war in and of itself. They violated, there was clear violations just there of shooting at Allied, because I think the British were also involved, but definitely the Americans. I don't know if anybody else was involved in those flying missions. They shot at aircraft that they agreed would be allowed to fly over parts of their country. They agreed to it. Oh, but it was at guns at their head. Yeah, because they fucking lost the war. So they violated the treaty that ended the conflict over Kuwait. The UN sanctioned and approved actions for the U.S. And violations of that treaty trigger back the original, without needing any more U.S. or UN support, trigger back the restoring of hostilities. So yeah, and what's wrong with a trade war? I'm 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 not getting this. Oh my! Because you're using the word war. There are massive, and I know you're from Germany. There are massive regulations and tariffs against U.S. goods going into Germany, and there's also large subsidies for like the steel industry and I think the auto industry in Germany to help Germany sell autos to other parts of the world, including the U.S. Those steel subsidies may not be directed at the U.S., but they definitely affect trade with the U.S. So, hey, we have a bunch of tariffs and regulations that make it impossible to sell stuff in our country, but you can't do it to us. Why is that even a concern? Israel at the moment is systematically working against the people of Palestine, and they didn't just start now. Yeah, the Israelis were attacked. Oh, like in 1936 and 1938, peaceful Jewish settlers were attacked by Arabs, and they've been attacked by Arabs ever since. Uh-huh. Yeah, it didn't just start now. Talk to President Clinton about the Palestinians. He got them a peace deal that would have given them the West Bank, including at least most of the Jewish settlers removed by force by the Israelis, and Gaza. Talk to him about how, no, they just wanted to keep killing Jews. Talk to President Clinton. Look at some of his speeches about that, because he was very much involved with that. So, of course, systematically, yeah, go Israel. Go Israel. They don't want to live with you, Israel. The Arabs, they don't want to live with you. So you've got two choices, Israel. Into the sea or fight for your lives. They've learned the lesson. They've learned the lessons of the past. So go Israel. I am a big Zionist. Peaceful. I don't know what in context I said that you're referring to it, but yeah, okay. Well, oh, you're talking about no. If you really look at um, uh, the Jewish migration into Israel, or um, the uh, Palestinian mandate at the time that was a British mandate prior to World War II, it was very peaceful prior to World War II. After World War II, that's a different matter. But prior to World War II, it was very peaceful. Yeah. Um, but what the Jews were doing. 2 million Arabs are Israeli citizens. Entire towns and areas are Arab enclaves. However, Palestinians would not tolerate a single Jew in the West Bank. Absolutely, folk. Many years ago, when I was traveling in Europe, I met two young women school teachers that were Israeli Arabs. I presume, I'm pretty sure they were Muslims, but they were very westernized. I mean, they were wearing, oh, you know, very Western clothes. I don't know if their arms were generally bare or not. I can't state, but they were wearing, jean trousers and whatnot. You know, you wouldn't know that they were Arabs, shall we say. You might, if you just said Israeli, you might think that they were Jewish. Um, and I talked to them a little bit about it. No, yeah, they said, oh yeah, because they were school teachers. Oh, we're second class citizens. Our schools are not funded as well as the Jewish schools. We don't have as good. But they weren't coming. They weren't talking. This was before the Intifada had started. They weren't talking, and I don't know how they would react now. I presume they're still alive somewhere in Israel. How they would react now, but it was no. And they were in Europe, and I was an American, so they wouldn't seem like any. And they were criticizing, like saying that we were second class citizens, and saying that their schools weren't nearly as well supported as Jewish schools. So they were criticizing Israel, but they weren't calling themselves Palestinians. They weren't calling to get rid of Israel. They were accepting that the world is a harsh place, and they were Israelis, and a second class, maybe the second status or whatever. They weren't the Jews. So yeah, they were living in basically a peaceful thing. And now these were educated women, and that they were school teachers, and they had enough money for a holiday tour in Europe. A very cheap one, because I was not yet 21, forget my exact age, over 18, but right in there, just out of high school, from America, taking a cheap tour around Europe. So yeah, it wasn't like a fancy tour. It was a very budget-friendly tour. But they had enough money to do that, the pair of them. So yeah, they were in my tour group. Thanks for following the channel. I appreciate it. Whoever's doing that. So yeah, they weren't, they were I would say relatively satisfied with their status, because they could see the Palestinians that were living in the camps, whether in Jordan, in the West Bank, in Gaza, up in Beirut. They could see these other Palestinians, if you will. They could see know the conditions of the poor Arabs in places like Egypt or Syria or Iraq. And their basic status was, compared to a lot of those places, decent. No, it's a raid? Oh, hey, yes, I see. Lucky Marine Games. Well, thank you for the raid. Very much. Thank you. Thank you, Lucky Marine Games. So they were satisfied with their status. I'm not saying they were happy. Notice, I'm not saying like happy, overjoyed, waving, Israeli flags with a Jewish star on it or anything like that. But with the realities of the situation, because I was curious. I didn't know them well. I was just say they're part of my tour group. And I would say they were in their late 20s at the time, 10 years older than I was or something. So, hey, yeah. And like I said, I don't know how they would think about it now, their situation. But Folk is very right. There's a long history of anti-Semitism. And I don't like that. Okay, so we've done the Führer principle. I like this mechanic. I wish it was more like the Hearts of Iron 3 with a standard cabinet, if you will, of ministers. We're going to do this just because it's historical, and we're going to, with getting optimized Reich labor services, which I think will help us out, and that. And we won't be able, this is also very, very good, but I'm going to take the delay and just get Rudolf Hess. Rudolf Hess is a very interesting, very fascinating person. And no, fascinating doesn't mean I think he's a good person, if anybody's thinking that. But if you know who Hess is, if you really know who Hess is, oh man, he is. I'll get to your comment in a minute, Con. Hope you don't mind me calling you that. Way back when I was in university, one of my courses that I had was just on Adolf Hitler. Not on World War II, not on just on Adolf Hitler. And it was not upper division. There was only like 13 or so people. I don't remember the exact number, but a small number of people in the class. And it wasn't a class with tests. And the professor did lecture a bit, but it was more of a conversation. And so each one of our students in the class was to write a paper on Hitler and some aspect in of Hitler. And I don't remember all the other students what they did, and I don't even know if I kept their, because we back in the olden days before everything was computerized, we made photocopies and had to pass out our papers to the other students to read each other's. I remember one guy who was in the class, and this is just because it was easy to remember. His paper was on Hitler and the Bauhaus movement, which is an architectural movement in Germany at the time. He was an architectural student, of course. My study was Hitler's rise to power, which is Hitler up until 1933. And so I did a deep dive back then in university. So I have some, just call me Keck. Okay, Keck. It's supposed to be Keck on crack. Okay, I don't know how, when these people that don't easily divide up their names, I don't know how to. Oh, and hey, I like people, Keck, who challenge my views. You're not unwelcome here if you're challenging my views. You can become, assholes aren't, people that are rude, no, but you can challenge my views here. I'm happy to have you here. So I do have a serious academic background in studying this whole period of Germany and whatnot. Bauhaus is still used in buildings around the world. Oh, I know. It was just that. So, and there wasn't really a textbook for this course. I read a collection of books, a few that I bought, and others that, checking out of the university library and whatnot on Hitler and the rise to power. Particularly Charles Flood's book on Hitler's rise to power is very, very important. So I've studied some of this early period. Hitler, who is one of the very few non-officers to get Iron Cross First Class, because that's basically an award for officers. So he is a pet of the German establishment, if you will. And so he's kept in the army after World War I ends. Well, the army is worried about all kinds of things, of course, but worried about all these different political movements on the right and on the left. And they want to infiltrate these groups. Well, Hitler is one of the people that is selected to go infiltrate these groups. And just really sort of become a member and hang out and give us reports so we know what's going on. kind of thing. Because if you have to realize, with all the Spartacus rising in Germany, which was a radical communist group that were massacring people, literally going into like a school and killing all the students. And then you have the Freikorps movement, which were right wingers that were army veterans going in and battling the various left wing groups. And so, almost a civil war. You could even categorize it as a civil war if you want. Not as, big a civil war as you have out in Russia, but there's real fighting with machine guns and armored cars and obviously rifles and whatnot. I don't think anything like planes bombing targets, but I maybe. But it was a serious battle. Well, Hitler's sent in to find out about the DAP, the Deutsches Arbeiterspartei. And sorry, Germans, I'm sure I'm butchering you on your language, but hey, it's fun American butchery. He's sent in to find out what's going on. If you know anything about the DAP, it is a front organization for a German occultist movement. I'm trying to remember the name of the group. Oh boy. For those of you, and there are a few new around here, thanks for showing up. I blank on proper nouns for some reason. I don't know. And if you just even give me a hint, I can normally get I like a person's name, but it's coming out of Guido's what is it? Guido List, I think. Spiritual movement coming out of Madame Blavatsky's theosophical movement, but sort of nationalized for Germany, if you know about all this stuff. But it's a Southern German paranormal occultist movement that had prior to World War I existed in one format or another. The Thule Society, that's it, the Thule Society. Got it. Or Thule. Thule sounds better to English, but I do think it's Thule. The Thule Society. That had existed in one format or another for some time. And they see, and some of this I'm interpreting, they see that the path to power had been to influence the elites, but in a post-World War I period, you needed to have a mass political party that dealt with the common man, if you will, the working class. So this occult society creates a harmless sounding political party name that's just very generic. The German Workers' Party in English, obviously. The day was, yes, exactly. Yes, yeah, you're getting there. I know you probably knew this, but I don't know that everybody here is watching knows this, so I'm giving the background. So Hitler's sent out to go find out about this party. But Hitler, who didn't get along, he wasn't very popular with his military unit. I don't know why, but he wasn't very popular. I don't know if he was a suck up to the people in control or whether his personality just didn't click. But obviously, Hitler has the speaker's personality. He can enthrall an audience. So he starts speaking at the early DAP members. Now, also, again, you have to put all these dots together to understand what's going on. The Buddhists and the Hindus, as well as some of the American Indians, who supposedly didn't have contact with them, but all have swastikas as a symbol. Madame Blavatsky uses the swastika as well as other religious symbols in the theosophical movement that she brings, because she supposedly goes up to Tibet and gets shown some secret tablets or whatever, and gets this secret knowledge and brings it back. Well, these German occultists, which are coming off of, is influenced by the theosophical movement. Not necessarily that they're exactly part of it, but they're influenced by this. Pick up on that swastika. And it also becomes a good luck symbol with many Germans in the later part of World War I, that then some of the Freikorps movement sort of kind of uses their symbol as well. But it has very much an Eastern mysticism connection to it. Now, somebody at the DAP sort of reverses the swastika. It mostly goes in the opposite direction in Asia. Not 100%, but mostly goes in the opposite direction. Somehow it gets reversed. Well, Hitler gets in there, and he's dealing with Anton Drexler and some of the other people. Going way back, and I don't know that we have clear documentary evidence of it, but going way back into the Thule Society, Rudolf Hess is a member. He is deeply embedded in this occult movement. Hope this is interesting to all of you out there. I know it's not playing the game, but so Hess, he's involved in this occult movement. Hitler's coming in, and his personality is starting to outshine some of the founders. And Hitler realizes that the DAP and their simple swastika isn't going to cut it. So he introduced, and Hitler, they also talk about being a failed art student, and his paintings, they're boring. I mean, they're executed okay watercolors. That's mostly what he works in, is watercolors. They're okay, but they're just sort of normal, whatevers. But he has an idea for a good look for graphic design. And he knows that to get a mass party, and Hitler is an anti-capitalist. He is also not a communist. But he knows that socialism is going to, an element of socialism is what is needed, not communism. So that's why he adds the National Socialist to it, and he's the one that creates the red field, keeping the swastika but in a white circle, and he's the one that creates the red field, and he's the one that, instead of straight up, because if you notice, most of the swastikas, there's some famous photos or whatever of guys that, in 1918 or 1919 or whatever, have swastika painted on their helmets. They're all sort of square to right angles to the to what would be the flag. Hitler's the one that sort of makes it rotating, if you know what I mean. And so he's the one that comes up with those two things. I believe, now this is getting into belief, 45-degree rotation difference between swastika and the Hakenkreuz. Yes, folks, that is part of it. You normally don't see the rotation in any of the Asian usage of the swastika. And it would be, like whether you see that up in Finland, you see it without the 45-degree rotation. If you see a Hindu temple or a Buddhist temple with a bunch of swastikas on it, me as a white guy, because were to throw that on some clothing, they would probably presume that I'm a Nazi sympathizer or a Nazi, if I was using a Buddhist one. So it probably wouldn't be the best look. But if you're an Asian guy, again, could be Indian or Japanese or Chinese or whatever, and you have a sort of vertical swastika, we could call it non-rotating, presume he's not a Nazi or Nazi sympathizer. Now, of course, there's lots of Japanese, as we call them nowadays, cosplayers that I've seen some photos, and they're dressed up as, the Kamitsky Brigade, and the Ordnungspolizei, the mass murder squad type people. And I'm wondering, why are you spending all that money to dress up like those guys? I get sort of the Waffen SS because they're sort of elite combat soldiers, and you're Asian, so you're not traumatized by the war crimes that the Nazis did. So it's just another, symbol of the past that you're dressing up as like cool combat soldiers. I get that. I'm not saying that's what I want to do, but I get that. I don't get why they want to be the dress up as the mass killers. Don't get that. But and they're putting enough effort into their uniforms that they got to know these things. It's not like they're just renting them at a costume rental place and don't know what they're putting on. Sort of like Graham Plattner, the guy running for the Senate as a Democrat in Maine, who had a big the SS Totenkopf, a large fist-sized one on his chest. You don't get that without knowing what it is. And you don't keep it on your chest for 15 or 20 years without knowing what it is and then being so embarrassed that you don't want to cover it up. Oh, now that he's running for office and got caught, he gets it covered up. Notice with a Celtic symbol, and I'm Celtic in background, and I have no problem with Celtic symbols. But there's certain groups of people out there who try to use Celtic symbols as sort of their version of a Nazi thing too. So if you see a Celtic symbol like a Celtic cross, which is a cross with sort of a wreath in the center of it, most of them are probably just normal Celtic types that want to, separate themselves out from a more English Protestant Christian or a Catholic Christian. They sort of want to be a Celtic Christian or whatever. Most of them are that way, but a few of them are sort of pseudo neo-Nazi types. That's a very, ambiguous thing. So it's very interesting that he goes Graham Plattner. He maybe have Celtic ancestry, Irish or Scottish or Welsh or something. I don't know. Gets a Celtic symbol instead of the peace symbol, or I don't know, whatever it might be. Or just have it erased because there's modern laser stuff that wouldn't make it maybe go 100% away in the first treatment, but could go in and get rid of it. But yeah, it's very iffy there. I think he's a Nazi. Because, hey, a lot of the Democrats now hate the Jews, and Nazis are sort of kind of socialist. Not communist, but sort of kind of socialist. So, back to Hess. And this is why I think he's a fascinating person. He's an occultist. And this is what I believe. By the occultist group, he gets assigned to watch Hitler because Hitler's new to them. Hitler's an Austrian who's been living in Bavaria for since before World War I, but not for long, but for a while. So he's sort of new to them, and he's also from a very middle class, but sort of lower middle class background. His father's a postmaster, and what was somewhere around here. A government son of a government functionary. Where this is sort of an elitist movement. I think Hess is put in there to watch Hitler, and that's his job. I think eventually Hess becomes a devoted follower of Hitler because he believes that Hitler is guided by, we'll just call it the great powers. I don't know if we can readily assign a specific name to God or to the whatevers, because Hitler believes in higher powers, though he does not follow the Christian God. Hitler is anti-Christian. When he's visiting Mussolini in one of his visits down to Rome, I believe it was, but one of his visits, he's visiting down there, and Mussolini is periodically having serious conflicts with the Catholic Church. He works out things. But Mussolini asks Hitler how he deals with the church. And Hitler's basic reply is something like, I don't have any Christians around me. And if you look at all of the true inner circle, they put this guy here Hans Karl is the Reich Minister of Church Affairs. He is nowhere near Hitler's inner circle. Hitler does try to pervert the Catholic, or I think it's, no, the Protestant church. He tries to pervert the Protestant church, but Niemöller and others just completely reject that. And that really goes nowhere. That's a nothing thing. All of the inner circle around Hitler are not Christians. None of them. And if you look at, like, Constantine van der Roth is a very strong Catholic. He is nowhere near Hitler's inner circle. I don't even really know if you could really call him a core, Nazi believer in a general thing. He is more of a holdover from the German nationalists. And if you don't know, he is at about this time he is the Reich Minister, like it says, of Foreign Affairs, and Joachim von Ribbentrop is the NSDAP's, and it depends just on what date, and I don't always have the dates perfectly right. He is the NSDAP's Minister of Foreign Affairs that spends part of the time leading up to this as the ambassador to England. He later supplants Constantine van der Roth as foreign minister, but at first he's just the party's foreign minister. Constantine van der Roth then, because he's a Catholic, gets assigned down to bring Austria into the German Reich for a while before he gets assigned to take over Bohemia. So he stays around, but he's nowhere near the inner circle. If I'm getting some of the details wrong, I'm sorry. I'm going off of memory here. But and so you look at Hitler's inner circle. He excludes Christians from it, which is a very important thing to understand about all of this inner workings and what's really going on. So yeah, Hess is a very interesting personality. Yes, and the just to be clear, and it's sometimes hard to define out between right wing and left wing, but fascism is a socialistic party. Benito Mussolini's parents were strong socialists. They named their son after the Mexican president, Benito Juarez, the revolutionary Mexican president. And Mussolini eventually comes to be the editor for the primary or the major or the biggest, whatever, socialist magazine in Italy, political. And then I don't know all the story around it, but then around World War I, he becomes a strong nationalist and an anti two things that he's anti on socialism. One, it's international focus. He believes in very strong nationalism. And he's no longer a leveler. A leveler is a term coming out of England that is in the 17th century, is primarily used at first. And it's not a communist philosophy, but it's a leveling philosophy, meaning everybody should be about equal, including no one should be too rich. That doesn't mean you shouldn't own your own farm or own your own small, shoemaking business, because remember, this is a pre-industrial world. But you shouldn't have large elites, whether they have titles or not, or others that own a whole lot. So you may be, in the leveling world, you may be employing a few people. Not everyone is, everyone would have like an equal vote. At least males, equal vote. But sort of leveling out society economically, but without the constant redistribution of socialism. taking from one and giving to another. No, it's more get fairness in the system and then somehow keep anyone from becoming too rich because that's unfair, if you know what I mean. Not that everyone has to, be 100% equal. And there is not, in leveling, there is not the idea of a collective ownership of the means of production. It can be individual ownership. And there are sort of communal type philosophies in the Middle Ages, into the Renaissance, into the Age of Enlightenment, for sure. But leveling itself is not. So leveling is part of modern day socialism and communism, in that everyone should be equal outcomes. Everybody should have the same level of income, whether it's a car or the same computer or the same size of apartment. That's leveling. Mussolini rejects leveling. But he is still socialist. He still believes in the collective ownership of the means of production. Oh, sure, an individual or a corporation can own a big factory, but only so far as it's serving the collective of the people, right? So highly regulated. You cannot exploit your workers, meaning you got to give them enough pay. You've got to give them enough days off. You've got to give them enough worker safety. You got to give them all this kind of stuff. Oh, and your products that you make, because they're not in the digital world or anything, products that you make, you can't exploit the customer. You can't sell it for too high. You can make a fair profit on your thing. And we also don't want to have this capitalistic competition. So we'll figure out how many, we need 1 million shoes made per year in Italy, let's just say. And we'll centralize plan and go, you company, you get to make 200,000. You're a smaller company, you make 100,000 shoes and all this stuff. So he wants to allocate out resources like a socialist government does, as opposed to market forces. So Mussolini is a planned economy, hierarchical, national, socialistic movement. National Socialism, in some ways, yes. Keck. National Socialism is not fascism. Hitler's National Socialism is often mistaken for fascism plus racism added on top of it. No. Hitler does not want a centralized planned economy. We're talking about Hitler's vision here. He eventually gets a centralized planned economy because of the war, because you have, in essence, a single source, not 100% really, but a single source purchaser of goods, meaning shoes are really now made as boots, clothing is made as uniforms. Larger industrial capacity is made as tanks or guns or artillery pieces or whatever. It becomes centralized planned, mostly under Speer, because of the war. But Hitler doesn't want that. Hitler does not want the exploitation of capitalism as he sees it, both of the worker and the customer, but he wants competition. Hitler's a competition guy. Hitler's a Darwinian guy. Hitler wants, either within the NSDAP, different branches, he wants them competing against each other. He wants things like the Reich Arbeitsdienst, the National Labor Service, to compete with, again, blanking on names, or Organization Todt, or the one of the other groups out there. He wants these organizations to compete against each other. Yeah, there is some centralized planning even in the early days. You can definitely point to, but Hitler wants that competition, wants that, Darwinistic, survival. He wants that he believes that what makes you strong. that sort of Conan kind of thing. That which doesn't kill you makes you stronger kind of thing. Hitler wants that. Hitler sees centralized planning as long-term just death because it becomes without the competition. Hitler wants that. So Hitler's not a fascist. Now you will find parties in other countries outside of Italy and outside of Germany that will either use the Nazi brand or use the fascist brand that are the opposite, meaning like some Nordic party using the swastika and the Nazi stuff, and they're really fascists. Or you may find a fascist group that's really a bit more National Socialist. Um, they're both authoritarian ideologies, but they're both, but Hitler also believes in the collective ownership of the means of production. Now, he too is a hierarchist. He does not believe in leveling. He does not believe everyone should be equal. But again, he sees capitalism, both market capitalism, like we talk about Adam Smith and others, as well as the way the socialists use the term capitalist, as in a person who owns capital, but is often not, gets like a Bavarian exclusive rights to sell cars in Bavaria or something like that, without competition, if you will. Meaning you're exploiting the people or whatever by getting a monopoly on something, or you have a monopoly because you own all the coal mines in the region, and shipping coal from another region is going to be more expensive, so you got to buy the coal from the one guy and he sets the price. That's another form of capitalism, but it isn't what most shall we say, liberal Western countries call capitalism, because to them, capitalism has that market function, the competition. Hitler, and Mussolini see capitalism as in that exclusive control of capital by an individual that will, in one format or another, use that as a way to exploit. So Hitler's anti that, and he's also not as bad an anti market capitalist, but he sees the idea that, well, hey, the company is going to try to get the lowest paid workers it can. It's not going to try to pay any more than it has to for a worker. And it's going to try to sell the product at the most it can get for the product, as opposed to pay them a fair wage or don't make too much profit. You are exploitative. Notice a lot of modern people have the same idea. And so National Socialism, as Hitler views it, is different than fascism, and it's often mistaken about it. So yeah. Okay. So we've got Hess. We can't get Tote just yet because you have to wait. What is the 175 days? So we've got a long time until we get Tote in. So we're going to do the 4-year plan, which will, I think we will. Let me take a quick look at the tech tree here. If there's, we don't want to do him just yet. We can't do the Condor Legion yet. I don't think the Civil War. Technically, communist states were huge capitalist states because party controlled all companies and factories. Hello, Strelheim Ba Bravik. I don't know how to pronounce that. Sorry, I don't mean to be bad. Yeah, in that sense, but they see it instead. They don't see it as exploiting the people. They see it as collective ownership. But you're absolutely right. They are, in essence, the capitalist in the idea that they're the ones that control the capital, the means of production. And capital can be a capital good, like a big stamping machine that, can, stamp auto body parts or stamp out helmets or chamber pots or whatever, big stamping machine. That's a means of production in capital, or money to buy something like a stamping machine is seen as a means of production, as capital. And so they see capitalists as individuals greedily holding it. Socialism, in the modern sense, like we can talk about, there's communalism or communist type things going way back. I mean, way back into the Middle Ages and whatnot. And some of those actually sort of make kind of sense because you're in a post-apocalyptic, the world came to an end, people, when the Roman Empire falls in the West. They're rebuilding the world. So yeah, in a small community where you got to share the resources, it actually, in a small community, it actually sort of kind of can make sense if you have a collective. What is socialism? I'm sure there's some good definitions out there, but a quick one could be the collective ownership of the means of production. That might be a basic. Hello. What is it? Boostar or Booster, or I don't know how you pronounce that, but good to have you here. So socialism is collective ownership of the means of production. So is my mic here a means of production because it's allowing me to that sounds very communistic. Oh, well, socialism, as Lenin said, is just a step towards communism. Communism and socialism is a big umbrella that its ultimate goal is socialism's ultimate goal is communism. Booster. Okay, booster. That's cool. Wasn't it the other way around? Well, it depends on, you can be when Lenin is looking at it, he's looking at communism as the end goal, and the socialist parties are just the path to get there. Okay. So, okay. When Karl Marx and Engels are writing, are in the very early stages of the Industrial Revolution. You also, at that same time frame, I know I'm a history nerd and whatnot, but I don't retain dates really well. Yes, I know June 6, 1944 is D-Day. I know a few dates, but can't pull them all off. But also around the time of Karl Marx, you also have Malthus. He is the one that's predicting global starvation because of the population boom. Malthism is wrong. Marx is wrong on so many things, not just his communism, but also his views of history. And most sociological history type professors are Marxists today, even the right-wing ones, because they still buy into Marx that most everything is economically driven. Economics is important, but it's not. It may be in the top 5, but it's definitely not the top 2 or 3 motivations for human activity. Economics is much lower. And so people that are anti-communists are still Marxists in their history views. And I reject all of that, and the more I've looked into it. So, but what Marx's worldview is that there's a certain amount of farmland out there. And if one person has more, it denies somebody else farmland. And in fact, it sort of kind of is. If Russia's really big, it's denying Poland farmland, because Poland, because that is a finite resource. But economies are not finite things. This is where the Marxist is wrong. Marxist wants everybody to have a fair piece of the pie because they believe the pie is only so big. But what we can see, especially if you look at, say, the U.S. during World War II, the U.S. goes through an economic boom. It industrializes. And most of those factories that the U.S. produces during World War II continue after World War II for a time. Eventually, the steel industry is destroyed and other things. But they just convert from military production to civil production. So economies can grow. And it's sort of like the belief that if gold is money, if I have 5 ounces of gold and you have no, somehow I'm denying you your quarter of an ounce of gold or something. I have too much gold. But if we look at modern monetary theory, money is a storing a value of labor is one of the ways of looking at it. So, and obviously we have inflation if you print too much of it. But as economies grow, you can have more money supply, and so you have more economic activities. So those that look at the world through a Marxist viewpoint is really sort of looking at it at a pre-industrial world, not in a industrial world or a post-industrial world or whatever we want to call ourselves now. They're not looking at it in that framework. They're looking at it from a static framework. That, oh, sure, yeah, if you go to an undeveloped part of Russia and you build a hydroelectric dam, yeah, you're increasing the amount of power supply. But it all has to be fair because it all will deny somebody something else idea. Okay, let me go back and check up the chat and then we'll get going on this. Okay, yes, he does not want a monopoly and exploitation, but has nothing against ownership of capital as long as it's in competitive and they have no real control over the people. Oh, but also I would add Keck to that if you're talking about if that's Hitler, yes. But also so long as it serves the greater good of the people as well. That has to be put in there. So if you're seen as not, for whatever reason, even if you're paying your workers well and you're not exploiting the customer, you still have to be benefiting the people, in his case, the German people, obviously. You have to be benefiting the German people. So you've got to make something that the German people need and not something they don't. Like a luxury good in a time of need, if you will. And it doesn't have to be in a time of need of war. It can just be a time of need for getting everybody out to have a cheap radio or something. You've got to be serving the national interest as well. Let's see. Okay. So if you want to read socialism as an economic political system based on public or collective ownership of the means of production, aiming to create more egalitarian society by replacing private and profit-driven economy, its emphasis on direct. Yeah. Okay. That's a more detailed view of socialism. Very correct, I would say. Okay. Any idea that supports the existence of currency and trade of money is capitalistic. That is why ideas like the barter system and anarchist ideas are not capitalistic. Barter system is capitalistic. Because if you look at the medieval economy, and I have studied the Celtic economy up in the Highlands of Scotland in the 17th and 18th century, in which very few people had money, but they had means of exchange. So you didn't so much buy things with money, you bought them, or people did labor and you gave them food, if you will. And even Gene Roddenberry in his development of Star Trek, which is not communist. Roddenberry was a human secularist. He was not a communism. So meaning in his Star Trek world, nobody believed in religion, because at least none of the Federation or whatever did, because they were rational people who got beyond the superstitions of religion. That's very much what he's promoting with Star Trek. But he cannot actually, and he also believed Star Trek is in a post-scarcity economy, so that all the basic needs can be filled for everyone. And people that go into Starfleet or other organizations like that do so because they wish to do something with their lives, not because they needed a paycheck. And that in his vision, they don't even necessarily get a paycheck. But when they're coming down to try to do DS9, very good series, they can't quite envision a world and show it practically without some sort of monetary economy. And they really try to make out the Ferengi as some sort of bad because they're some sort of greedy, money hungry people. But even that whole system, he cannot actually articulate a large scale society well without an economy. So he just mostly skips over it. So the anarchist idea is anarchists are anarchists and they're all anarchy, and either that or they're socialist hiding as something else. So yeah. Yeah, they don't think you can grow the price. Are you still in third? Yes. Can we? We're no. I'm not going to play multiplayer for this because I'm just playing on Saturdays here. Marx thinks all values come from labor. Non-labor factors like land and capital have no independent contribution to value. Yeah, Marx is wrong on so many things. And I'm going to, after reading this next thing, I'm going to go grab, yes, and Arno, yes, you love DS9. It's a great series. Also, workers in modern capitalistic countries had far greater rights than those provided by socialist dictatorships. To me, the most evil ideology of recent times, the last 200 some years, is communism. It's not just that communism kills a lot of people or it doesn't work. No, it is evil. It is more evil than the Ku Klux Klan. It is more evil than the National Socialists, the Nazis, and Hitler. It is more evil than them, not just because it kills more people. It does. But it is evil because it is anti-human. I was going to go get something to drink, but let me, as you people know, I'm not good at quoting things, so I came up with this and you took it from a couple of sources. And let me see if I can get this quickly from my saved information here. And I felt so important that I was going to save it. Let's see. Here's why communism is evil. Why communism is evil. The exercise of vital powers, which I get actually some of these quotes from Babylon 5. The exercise of vital powers. The phrase has a philosophical meaning, defined by the Greeks as the exercise of vital powers along the lines of excellence in a life affording them scope. This is what that's a quote there. This definition suggests that happiness is achieved through actively using one's abilities and potential to the best of their ability within a life that allows it. Communism doesn't allow this to happen. That is why communism is evil at its core. Okay? Are they worse than Nezbols? I don't know what Nezbols are. Sorry if I should know what those are. If you're saying Nazis, yeah, they're worse than Nazis. Because you can love or hate Elon Musk, but if you look at the way he uses his life, he is definitely exercising his vital powers along the lines of excellence in a life affording them scope. National Bolsheviks. Okay. Didn't know the term. Yeah, no, it's Bolsheviks are bad. They're communists and they're levelers. I hate levelers, even without it, because I think you understand of my reading of this what I mean. And communism, because it requires even if you don't have a dictatorship, even if you somehow achieved the dream of a sort of stateless communist world, it precludes something defined as the means of production, whatever that may be, however they may define it. as not being allowed to use people's their best of their ability. It might be, oh, well, hey, you get to be an artist or something. Yeah, someone sitting in front of it with a paintbrush or something. Yeah, if that's all they wanted to do. But this is why communism is evil, because it is anti-human. If we were more like ants, yes, humanity needs to live within a community. You really cannot, truly go live on your own. Okay. Now, a small community could go create, flint knap and get some animals and skin them and make clothes. Yeah, but that's a small community. An individual really can't live on their own. But we're also not some hive mind collectivist species. The most collectivists we get are out in the East, in Asia. We are not some detailed collectivist species. So, yeah, there's a community aspect that the socialists, the left, want to exploit that idea. But this is why communism, I'm not saying National Socialism, Nazism, however you want to define it, isn't evil. No, no, no. But communism is the most evil thing I can detect. The second most evil thing I can detect, the second most, is pacifism. And on that, I'm going to go get a Coke, and I'll be back. And I'll tell you why pacifism is evil. Almost back. That's a bit better. Pacifism isn't the absence of war or the absence of violence. Pacifism is the unwillingness to defend yourself or others. A good example is Switzerland. Switzerland, since the sort of modern foundations of post-Napoleonic world, post 1815 or whatever, has not gone to war with any other nation. But they are the opposite of pacifist. International law, because the Swiss are such a violent people, it is against international law to hire a Swiss person to fight for you. There is only one person on this planet by international law that can hire the Swiss to fight for them because they are so violent of a people. And that is the Pope. Swiss mercenaries have been long banned since sometime in the 19th century from being mercenaries. And it is illegal for you to hire, it is illegal for them to go to become a mercenary under international law, and it is illegal for them to hire you, or for you to hire them under international law. And the Swiss maintain their army, even in this post-Cold War world, in which they have basically universal male conscription that goes on until you're old. Now, you're in the reserves once you're old, you're not full-time. They are not pacifists, but they have not been in any war, in the 20th century. So pacifism is not the lack of violence. Pacifism is Oh, you and I have a dispute. You want to kill me. Okay, well, let's see. How can we work out a dispute? Okay, you get to kill me. Yeah, just where do you have a place you want to stab me? Pick it out. That's pacifism. And it's also, oh, hey, yeah, my little baby over here. You want to kill that too? Yeah. Is you going to strangle the baby or are you going to stab the baby? Oh, maybe get creative and chop it in two. I'm not going to do anything about it because I'm a pacifist. That is why pacifism is evil. Pacifism isn't the absence of war. Pacifism is the unwillingness to defend your community. Now, whether you want to define your community as your nation or the Western world, America gets involved in World War I or World War II, because, well, they were, World War I, sinking our ships out at sea. World War II, Japan attacks us. Germany declares war on us after that. Yeah, but, so the unwillingness to defend yourself or your community, I think, is evil. Because there are people out there, it's in human nature, to take from weakness. And deliberately spreading the idea of weakness, of pacifism, of disarmament, of not having your arms. Now, that's different than saying, hey, we should stay out of war unless we're attacked. We're Switzerland or, some other nation or whatever group. Unless we're attacked, we're not going to be violent. Okay, that is not pacifism. Pacifism is the unwillingness to defend yourself. Okay, so let me get back and read the chat before we get going. Although I agree that communism is terrible, I still think that it's self-destructive Nazism that literally does not have a single good or correct thing. I cannot say that it is better. Well, I'm saying it's less evil, okay? I'm saying it's less evil. It's the lesser of evils. And partially why I want to say this is because if I go onto a university campus with a swastika on me, I'm liable to get physically attacked. But if I were to go onto a campus with a hammer and sickle badge on me, people will want to shake my hand and say, good going. And so I want to make it out to be more evil. So yes. But I can say that they're actually similar in terms of self-destruction and destruction of others. Yes. Yes, they are similar, and they're all up there. But I do also, like I say, I hate pacifism, as you can tell. Okay, yes, 4-year plan. Let's do this thing. 35 days. So I'm not advocating that every country or every person should just want to go to war. That is not what I'm saying. And if you go, hey, I don't want to be involved in a war out in the Middle East, or hey, I don't want to be involved in the Ukraine war. I'm afraid that the Ukraine war will expand to other places and become destructive and all this stuff. Okay, yeah, that's a reasonable argument. Whether I agree with it or not, that's a different matter, but it's a reasonable argument. But to say we should never go to war over something, under no conditions, that I find to be evil. Because that is self-destructive. And destructive of others. Waiting for the Spanish Civil War to break out, which I think is in a few more months. Now, to talk about this playthrough, we have a few new people here. Thank you again for the raid. I was playing through a campaign that I just sort of on the spur of the moment, I had gotten away from Hearts of Iron 4 for a few years, and I came back to it spur of the moment. And then they updated the game, so then I bought the rest of the important DLCs, not all the country flavor ones, but the important feature ones. But in that last playthrough, my goals were to not have Italy in my faction. Italy had invaded Greece, and of course it had already taken out Yugoslavia, but it had sort of been doing that as a separate war, not in my faction. and I was, I taking out France at the end of, when we had to stop it. But I'm going to fight France, Britain, and then try to fight the Soviet Union. Don't know if we can keep the U.S. out of the war. I don't know if I'm planning on going to invade, do the, not sure on the Westerbunk stuff, but try to keep the Mediterranean out of the war. Doing mostly historical in other sense, but we're not doing the Axis, alliance here. We're doing this. And if pacifism is to be followed as law, then it should be appropriate in a global international sense law. Oh, perfect. I like killing Italy as well. I'm not planning on attacking Italy. I'm going to leave Italy alone. We're not doing a world conquest thing here. We're trying to do, because again, I'm trying to do lessons from history. I'm trying to look at all this stuff. We're trying to do Hitler's plan for going eastward, but we have to defeat our western flank first. But we're not going to get tied up in other affairs. Okay. Then they're going to join the Allies. We'll see. I have it set for okay, partially what I'm looking at with this playthrough and the last one is just how broken is the Hoy system. If Italy's at war with Greece, is it going to join the Western Allies, and are the Western Allies going to be allied with somebody who crushes Greece? We'll see. We'll see how this goes. This is going to see. Well, but you see, I'm going to call you Kovic. Strahinya Brovnik or Brokovnik. I don't know. Kovic. See, I'm even against that. If we were to achieve a one world government, whether that's good or not, I don't think we should, have random, matchups between continents or something just to have wars. No, but we should have. We're going to go with this one. We should still have an army. We should still have a navy. We should still have a space force, because what if there's aliens out there? And they're not like, are some of the bad ones or some of the violent ones. They're not super maybe overpowered of us, but we need to have that ability to train to fight. But hey, if we can move most of our fighting to, strategy games and shooter games and, tank and aircraft driving games and sports, where we get out on the football field and crash into each other, or boxing and mixed martial arts, bashing each other, people volunteering to do all that, obviously. Greece will probably only join allies if you're causing tension. Well, we'll see how this goes. This may not go well. We'll see. This playthrough. At least that's my goal. And again, for you, those new, I normally start a few hours ago, because I don't know where you are in the world, a few hours ago, and play on Saturdays. So you want to catch next Saturday is when we will. Oh, and tomorrow is War Thunder Day for us. Sundays, starting again a few hours earlier than now. We play War Thunder, and if we get enough people, we'll set up custom matches, but that's 8 or more people, basically. Otherwise, we'll just form a squad of 4, and I'll rotate a few people in and out. Okay, the 4-year plan. So we're definitely planning on having a good old war with France and England and whatnot, and seeing how that goes, and then seeing, okay. I'm a little worried about, and I think it's a little bit overdone, sorry, here, the MIFO bills. They were definitely a thing. So, but I think they're overdone, I think, in this game. And some of the autarky, I think, promotes pushing down or, getting stricter MIFO bills. And modify MIFO build. See here, constructive speed. I don't know. So what I'm going to do here, because I want to get some of these civilian businesses in early instead of military factories early, we're going to do the Autobahn next. Mostly World War II stuff. And because a few of the players really only focus on Germany, I would have loved to have War Thunder as a kid, because I used to play Micro Armor. War games on table, with rules and dice rolling and all that stuff. Would have loved to have War Thunder. So I've always been a fanboy of German armor, tanks, and all that kind of stuff. So mostly Germany I play, but we will play other nations too. But it's very much a try to play in World War II as opposed to modern era. And it's tanks. Oh, if that was the basic question, tanks, yes. So combined battles. So yes, some of the players jump into airplanes, and I do play a bit of naval, but not so much on Sundays, because the players don't really want to do it, and the viewers really don't want to watch naval. We'll also say that I'm a cosmopolitan. Okay, well, I understand the term for sure. Let's just move here and rail to there, but humanity is tribal. We can take down the Twin Towers in this. Can we take down the Twin Towers in this game? Well, hello. What is that? Sparkle Tarts? Is that right? Sparkle Tarts? Trying to parse that name. The Twin Towers aren't built yet. Up in New York. There is the Statue of Liberty we could in theory take down or something, but no Twin Towers yet. I believe things that are anti-humanistic. I'm not necessarily a secular humanist, but I am a bit of a humanist in that things that are anti-human nature are bad because they're anti our nature. So I can tell you, my anthropological type studies, humans are tribalists. If we don't have tribes, we make tribes up. Sports teams, and why people are devoted to a particular team that they've never played on. Manchester United or something, English football. Oh, people, they're in America and around the world, soccer is a woman's sport. Football, or European football, not American football, European football is a man's sport. That's how it should be defined. And in America, lots of young women, girls, whatever, they we're going to add another division. We'll give it a location up here. We need to have a large enough army to trigger some in 38, some of the Austrian Czech. So we're building that. So I don't know how good, if you look into National Socialism and how they were working, they even thought Paris fashion was bad because it was foreign. And they were trying to promote up German fashion. And I don't mean German old cultural kitsch clothing of Lederhosen or something. And I know there's different regions in Germany, different stuff. Not that. No, but modern fashion by German designers for German people. Paris fashion is bad because it's foreign. Okay. again, you can take anything to too far of an extreme. I think it's appropriate for cultures to adopt things from other cultures that they choose to adopt. And that is very different than say, having foreign cultures pushed onto you. But so I am not a person who some extreme tribalism, but I also think that instead of trying to have a cosmopolitan world that we all just sort of become a mashup, a mishup, whatever of different cultures, is having distinct cultures out there. And yes, a broken clock is right twice a day. Talking the old style clock. Competition is a good thing, because if we can see how, say, Germany does something, and say how the Philippines does something, and how Argentina does something, in the same sort of realm, we may go, yeah, the Philippines do that poorly. The Germans do it. Damn, it's so strict and regimented. I don't know if that's for us. It works, but that's for us. Maybe the Argentine way is sort of like good, because it's not as messed up or chaotic as the Philippines, but it's not as regimented as the as the Germans. It's sort of like, yeah, we'll do it the to have the different cultures and people be something of a distinct group, but that interact with each other, not trying to be Japan before Admiral Perry opens it up. No foreigners allowed. If they come ashore, we cut their heads off, except for the one little port for the Dutch to show up at, but everybody else. And they can't even leave that little island that they actually literally made a little tiny island that the Dutch could live on while they came there to trade, to keep foreign influence out. No, that's too much the other way, obviously. Okay, can you break limbs playing football, soccer? It's dangerous if other players are not civil. Well, anything players are not civil. We pass from families to tribes to nations. Our nation is developmental and evolutionary. So I believe that this is the next step. No, I disagree. I disagree. Until we find something out there that is radically different than us, basically something off planet out there that is interacting with us. Yes, I believe that in the universe, not but even just in our galaxy, I believe that there's aliens. I don't know that I buy that there's aliens here. There may be. I'm not saying there isn't. Far from it. I just, and I definitely don't think they're kidnapping a lot of people out of their bedrooms and, anally probing them or something, or drunk dudes in the forest that say that they got anally probed by the aliens. I don't believe a lot of those things. So, but that doesn't mean I'm not saying that there are zero aliens coming here. I definitely believe that there's, intelligent life out there somewhere. I don't know how pervasive it is. And I'm sure there's a lot more planets or whatever that have, simple cell life or something on it than that have really intelligent life on it. Okay, so we're going to research, and I've learned about the new system here to at least some degree. And so I think we need to have symbols that identify the group that we are in, whether that's languages, whether that's flags or patches or slogans or titles. I think that's all important. I think it's important to the human identity. And you know what? I think in your case, probably cosmopolitanism is your flag, your group, your whatever. That doesn't mean that it's going to become widespread, common. It may be the tribe of the cosmopolitans. It's just as tribal as the, an Arabic tribe. Because notice it's Saudi Arabia, meaning the Saudis, not Arabians or Arabs. It's the Saudis Arabia. Growing expertise in rearmament. Okay. Basic machine tools. We're going to do the historical dispersed industry. We're going to come over here and look, unlock. Okay. Mobile limbers, rapid fire. We can do it. Those are mutually exclusive. I think we'll start with mobile limbers. I don't know if there's a House of Saud, exactly. But it's not just a small nuclear family. It's sort of a tribe of Saud or something. ZZ, as I think you well know. So that's what I'm referring to, as in identity. And I think humans need it. You know, if you need something, okay, like a good example, you need salt to live. Okay, it's a requirement for living. Add a bit more salt, it makes things good. Too much salt ruins the taste of something, and even more salt will kill you. So is salt good or bad? No, salt is good because you need it, but you can abuse it and make it bad. This is why the European project, and I know some of the details that I bet you don't know about the European project, unless you've listened to me enough. But the European project, which is currently called the EU, is commonly thought to be a and it is largely, a post-World War II reaction to nationalism, blaming nationalism for World War II, as that is the cause. As opposed to the inability to react to Hitler in the political infancy. I don't mean going killing baby Hitler. I mean early on reacting to it and shutting down Hitler. But that nationalism is the cause of wars, so nationalism must be bad. No, that's too much nationalism, is what is bad, not nationalism. And so they've diagnosed that there's some problem there. And what they also don't get, and a lot of them are leftists of one flavor or another, not all of them, but a lot of them, they're buying into the international socialism. But part of the reason you have the hyper-nationalism of Italy, of Germany, part of the reason is the attempt to erase nationalism. If you try to ban religion, you try to vilify religion, which has been happening throughout the 20th century, trying to vilify it. Religion has caused more wars. You know how many times I heard this as a student. Religion has caused more wars than any other reason. So says the Marxist, who believes that the main driver of human activity is economics. So warfare is mainly over economics. But the main cause is religion has killed more people. Communism, with its belief, notice what I say, belief, in atheism, is a religion in that aspect. Not maybe the collective ownership of the means of production, but the belief that Marx spread and Lenin spread, not sure who exactly initiated it, but definitely Lenin was going it, that religion is the opiate of the masses. So that is a belief system that religion isn't the opiate of the masses, and that it must violently be suppressed. That is a religious belief. So all of the deaths, the 100 million or so in China with the Chinese Civil War, the proper names, which is just as escapes me, the Cultural Revolution, and then the Great Leap Forward kills like 100 million people or so in China alone. That's a religious reason for all of those deaths, because they were trying to stamp out traditional Chinese beliefs. Okay. So, yeah, all those people that blame religion for the wars are they themselves spreading what they don't see it as a religion, because they see religion as a belief in God, but a belief system in the way the universe works or whatever is what religion is ultimately meaning. So, if you believe that there is no God, that is a religious belief in and of itself. So, yes, they do that. Hey, Thomas. Hey there. I think aliens might have an easy time taking out one world government, and they just proceed and harvest the leaderless planet piece by piece. Well, it could be. Oh, I don't know that one world government's a good idea. Even if I were to like that government, I don't know that it's a good idea. Now, it would be one thing if, say, we do get space travel. And I specifically read a bunch of different science fiction series that at least started. One of them does morph into having aliens, but one about human expansion into space without encountering lots of aliens or of intelligent type species. Um, so sort of, so like, yeah, if like a bunch of Romanians were to go and claim a planet and have a global government that's Romanian on that planet, I think that'd be just fine, because we're presumably having a bunch of different planets out there. I truly think government, and I am against the idea of spreading democracy. I am against that, because I don't think my cultural values should be everybody's cultural values. I want different cultural values to exist. Now, I don't want Pol Pot out there killing somewhere between 1/3 and 2/3 of his population to create the new man, kill everybody who can read just because. No, I don't believe, I believe in reasonable, sensible governments. So if they want to be a dictatorship like Franco and not invade anybody and not go around, being aggressive to other nations, hey, knock yourself out, be Franco. Oh, there's abuses. So, there's abuses. You look at Franco's abuses versus Hitler's, and just internally. Hitler's abuses internally, Stalin's, Mao's, okay, we got that. And yeah, in the past more so than now, we, had abuses here in America. Even just Jim Crow and the segregation of the South is a bit of abuses, yeah. And, we had corrupt governments, like in Chicago. You can look at um, oh the Untouchables, the Sean Connery, um, Kevin Costner movie. That's corrupt government. They were mayors, judges, and everybody else running the corrupt system. Not just that there was a gangster leader called Al Capone, but the government itself was corrupt. And those are abuses. That the government doesn't do anything effective to shut down the criminals, and will at times use the criminals to go after their political enemies. That's abuses, and that's in the 20th century. Yeah, America isn't perfect. Not trying to say, yay, America does nothing wrong. No, I think it's better than more than half of the world countries out there. But whether it's the best or not, that could be another debate. We can again look at somebody like Switzerland. It might be a better for them, internally. And I'm talking internally now, not what is even happening to other governments. So I'm not concerned whether it's Franco or even, some other sort of dictator that isn't so terrible. I'm against communism, but if they want to try it, well, it's evil. Watch them. It's not that Kim Jong Un or whatever the current one, the fat guy, his name is. It's not that he's a dictator that I have a problem with. It's his running a communist government that I have the problem with. If he just wants to be a dictator, go ahead. And you can compare North Korea to South Korea and go, where would you rather live, North Korea or South Korea? What's doing better? And I want that points of comparison. And maybe in 30 years from now, we'll look at it and go, who do you like better, South Korea or North Korea? South Korea is collapsing because it's had no babies. And North Korea, well, it's North Korean communism, but hey, there's lots of people there. And they're doing okay, maybe. I don't know that they will be. They may be all starving or something. In the South, they may have plenty of food, but no people, so they're all disappearing. And in the North, they got lots of people, but no food. I'm not saying, but we'll see as time goes on what happens between the two Koreas. What started out as basically one culture. Now, I don't know that they have the same root culture, but I don't know that they're one culture anymore. They've been separated and are well divided between each other. Same we can look at Germany, between former East Germany and former West Germany, and how the attitudes are different, generally speaking. And I know two people that are from the former East Germany, youngish at best, if not very young at the time of unification. So one of them really doesn't know communist East Germany, but the attitudes in the East. And one's a very, very conservative guy, and one's a bit more liberal. Not a real lefty, but left of center. Good friends of mine, both of them. So yeah, so it's not always 100%, just because you're in the East, you're some right winger or something. But, and we may see I definitely have a Swiss German friend who's somewhat culturally different than Germans. So you separate long enough, they have the same root culture, but they develop their own, which we can look at like America and England or Britain or something, however you want to determine it, and how that culture is very, very similar, but changed differently. So this is some of my arguments against one world government. Not saying it won't eventually happen. I'm not even saying it won't eventually, because it depends on how humanity's understanding it. Is it going to be one unified, unitary government? Or is it going to be a loose confederation that, so long as you're not going too far in any one direction, you can do what you want? No like invading each other. But hey, if you want to be a bit more socialistic, fine, but you can't go full communist. Oh, hey, you want to have, harsh punishment for criminals? Yeah, but you can't just randomly, pick people up off the street for funsies. So, certain level of human rights, but, maybe not, going to, impose some sort of military invasion just because whatever, some violation of somebody's human rights, So it's, not all equal or something. So if it works out to actually be a good loose confederation that just keeps, but when we have the current UN that will put somebody like Iran's representative on women's rights issues. Really? Oh, it's a rotating thing. Yeah, fuck that. You have it rotating, but you say this country doesn't, get to be on any of these panels or on this particular panel or whatever. So, let's see. I don't know how it is with you, but where I live, where nationalists often become chauvinistic and call themselves nationalists, even though they're not. Well, yeah, I mean, people use words differently and understand things differently. That's very true. My point is, having several powerful political blocs on Earth might be bigger obstacle to potential aliens than one. Oh no, I understand that if you just have one system existing, that if you collapse that system, the whole thing collapses. I get that. Yes, the fat guy. Yes, in Korea. Yeah, the fat guy in Korea. North Korea. Little Rocket Man, as Trump calls him. Because the real Rocket Man is Elon Musk. He plans within like the next 5 years to be putting like, I don't know, like, here we go. Um, send volunteers. We want to send von Manstein's group, an armored and an infantry division. We want to do that. Okay, we've got the KDF wagon, and we can now do the Condor Legion. So we'll do that now. You might as well. Oh, one check. No, we can't do tote yet. How many days it's been, but it's not been 175. So we'll do the Condor Legion now. And oh, yeah, well, we'll modify it and maybe send down some aircrafts. One system is questionable anyways because of diversity. Well, I actually like real diversity, and I don't mean skin color diversity or making sure there's enough women on whatever thing somewhere, if you know what I mean. I'm not for that kind of diversity. But I don't like America trying to impose its detailed values on the world. I don't like that. That doesn't mean I don't think we shouldn't have gone into Afghanistan to beat them up after 9/11. That doesn't mean that Saddam Hussein was continuing, and he was continuing to break the peace treaty at the end of, the first Iraq war, that we shouldn't have gone into it. It may be a mistake. It's definitely on both cases a mistake that we stayed there so long. So, it's so I do like, and I dislike the American push to try to democratize the Middle East. They want monarchies, fine. If I can look at that part of the world, like something like Saudi Arabia or even Oman, which doesn't have lots of oil, and if I go, oh, hey, yeah, they're well governed. Yeah, it's pretty stable. The populace seems reasonably happy that they're the Sultanate of Muscat and Oman, or whatever it's officially called today. I don't know if that name is still. Yeah, they have a sultan. Is it going well? Okay, cool. They get to have a sultan. Oh, they have Islam as their state religion? Cool. England still officially, we can talk practically. Yeah, it's, the Church of England still, Okay, yeah, you can have a state religion. Cool. We don't need to spread religious freedom to Oman. Now, I don't want them to be, radical end times Islamicists who are sending, terror bombers around the world. That's, that I think is bad. But, oh, hey, you want to be generally Muslim and do your own thing and you're running pretty well? Then cool. I'm satisfied with that. I don't want to try to democratize it or improve women's rights in it. I have no interest in that. Do your own thing. And I'm picking Oman because I do think it's relatively stable and it's not a big oil producer. So it's not like, oh my God, just because they rolled the dice and came up with, a super wealth thing, No, they're just, average sort of Arab country that seems to be run well. And so, yeah. I have a friend who presents himself as a communist and has expressed hatred towards other races and other nationalities. Oh, well, hey, if you look at old school communism, as in during the Cold War, they were very racist. One, Marx was for slavery because he was a very big racist. And yeah, the Soviet Union was very anti-Jewish and lots of stuff like that. Oman was on the Zanzibar trade hack, but yeah, that is, you're actually right. And I have read about the English. Zanzibar, which is down here, was an island principality that was sort of a puppet state of the Omani group, whatever here, that had sort of direct control over some of the coastline here, and were doing the Arab slave trade thing even pretty late. Now, through a combination of cultural as well as castration, they kept, and they did not bring women up, black women up to the Arab world. So they did not have a persistent, they had a disposable slave thing, meaning they're going to dispose of them one way or another. If they get too old, well, we don't need you anymore. Very, very, more cruel, as far as I can tell. As far as I'm not the greatest scholar on it, but more cruel than any of the slave trades going to the Western world. And I'm not talking about some particular incident, and probably the overall most cruel was Haiti. Probably. Again, I'm not the greatest scholar on it. I'm not talking about, oh, well, this one case and this one thing, some massacre of something. Yeah, that. But I'm talking overall systematically. The Arab slave trade was much, much more brutal, much, much more dehumanizing. So, and everywhere in the world's had slaves prior to it. Prior to England stopping the trade. But so England wants to stop the trade, so they come in and take Zanzibar, and eventually, as part of it, secures Mombasa, which is an old Portuguese-founded city that sometimes was controlled by Portugal, sometimes not, by local groups, and at that time it was controlled by Zanzibar. Germany at around that time comes in and gets some other territories that were sort of kind of part of this Zanzibar group, but they sort of come in and go in the very early stages, and I don't have it all locked down, but sort of come in, hey, we'll protect you from the Zanzibar dudes. And they're like, well, cool, you white-skinned people, whoever you are, that, march around. And so they sort of get their control down here in England in stomping out areas that Zanzibar has more solid control over of the slave trade. They end up with these kind of things, territories. So yeah, Oman. Yeah, I'm going today. Oman is like, yeah, it's like whatever. It's not, radical Islam. It's not massive civil wars, cultural divides. It's not primitive like Sudan, but it's not Kuwait or Bahrain or whatever. Some of these smaller states that are, spawning, sitting on top of a lot of oil. There's not a lot of known mineral resource exploitation or whatever. I'm talking in the modern day sense. And so, yeah, I have no problem that, do they have a higher execution rate for criminals than I'd be pleased with, with not necessarily, solid proof? Maybe, or maybe I go, yeah, because I do believe in capital punishment. I want to reserve it for the most heinous of crimes, but slow this down by 1 because we're going to be fighting in the Spanish Civil War. And let's get extraction. So I'm not against capital punishment, but like I say, I want to, so they may be chopping hands off or something for basic thievery, and I think that may be a bit much. But again, I might judge personally, but as a government, I don't want America to interfere with it if it's working well. I'm happy with that. So yeah, as you can tell, I'm not, whatever America does is fine with me. I have my quibbles with it. I very much believe in, cleaning up this northern pocket here before, and then letting the AI, and then helping the AI take the rest of Spain. Get this first. And this is our training ground. Another attack there. And now Condor Legion, good. Okay. Where's army experience and whatnot? Still can't do tote. Trade deal with Sweden, which gives us a map, maybe here. 2 civilian factories. That. Okay, this is going to take a while until not normally 1938. Historically, at least. That's more 39. Uplift the Rosenberg office. Well, that's more 40 or whatever later. But east, now we are going to need to move down that path. But again, that's sort of starting in, I think, very early 38 or late 37. So we got a little bit of time before we want to do that. We do have to do this. It's only 35 days, so that's 70. But we need to make sure as soon as we can, we're going to get tote in there. Naval dockyards, that would be pretty cool. Expand the Luftwaffe air bases, which we'll want to do that eventually. Potential, okay. Brow hitch. Okay, we'll do that. My instinct is to do all the industrial ones, but it can get a little too over-focused on that. Let's look at our logistics. We have 250 artillery, 7,000 guns, support equipment, and we definitely need more aircraft. Now we are currently using up 100% of our rubber, so to what I'm going to do is these up here. I just want to get, I'm also not planning on doing the surface Navy thing. I'm going to complete out these builds since they're here and they're partially done. Go through and get those done. Then I'm going to switch over to submarines and just have submarines built. Oh, and transports. But we have maxed out on rubber, and to get more rubber, I need to use up civil factories, which I'm currently using to construct more civil factories. So we're going to continue to do the civil factory thing because I think it is strategically useful. That's almost full. Oh, we can throw in one there. Higher developed areas. Those going for now. Can you do some lend-lease to Franco? I think the army's enough. I don't know. We'll see. Or no. Well, okay. What does the German Navy need? Or what does Germany need with the Navy? had Germany in very late 19th century and early 20th century had put its efforts, had the Kaiser put his efforts into building up his army instead. Obviously, Air Force didn't exist at that time, more than maybe just a few guys experimenting with early planes. But two things would have been different. One, we'll get this out of the way quicker. Britain would not have been afraid of Germany becoming too dominant, I think. If you look at Britain for definitely starting in the 17th century, but through the 17th, the 18th, and into the 19th century, Britain fears a single dominant power in Europe. Whether that be the Habsburgs when they owned Spain, whole Queen Elizabeth and the Armada. That's why, well, that's even going way back before the 7th. That's going back to the 16th century. So you go back to the 16th century. So the Habsburgs controlling all that. Or later the Bourbons controlling France and then getting Spain as well once they get rid of getting rid of the Habsburgs in Spain. So they're also, as in the 16th century, supporting the Dutch, not because they think the Dutch are like the greatest people on the planet or anything, but they're afraid that because this was the Spanish Netherlands at the time, that it's very dangerous to them. And obviously with the Armada, they tried to do an invasion. So Britain does not want to help that, or does not want to have that, but they're also, religious. Especially, Queen Elizabeth isn't super worried about things, as she says, she doesn't have a window into men's souls or words to that effect. So she's not like Bloody Mary trying to get the Catholics back in, and she's not like, whoever that was trying to, purge everybody who might even have a Catholic thought in their head. She's sort of a moderate on that. But there is sort of, Prussian allied with Prussianism, if you will, because they are become, a Protestant monarchy. So there is some religious stuff. But when the Bourbons are getting too powerful, they're allying then with the Habsburgs to some degree to counterbalance it. So they definitely don't want a big dominant power, but they're very afraid of a big dominant power that has a big navy, right? Because if you don't have a big navy, and especially in a 19th, 20th century type period, it takes a long time to build one. And you can't build it in secret. Just it's too big of an industrial project. Now, the details, like how thick the armor is on the ships, maybe just how big the guns are, because it's not just the diameter of the gun barrel. It's also how much powder you can put behind it and how long the shell is. So if so what I'm saying is not all 10-inch guns are equal. You can make a 10-inch gun with a bigger chamber behind it and a longer shell, so it's just as heavy a shell and projectile as a 12-inch gun. So when it impacts on the enemy ship, it's impacting like a 12-inch gun. And because, it's not as big a hole, but the weight of the shell is the same. So it's not, so you can keep some of that sort of kind of secret maybe while you're building. Not that it eventually to some degree won't come out, but just how much armor penetration, and these things were like state secrets at the time, how much armor penetration your guns could do of certain types of, steel and whatnot, were state secrets. But building a large fleet can't be done in secret, and it cannot be done fast. It's going to take 2-3 years. So had the Kaiser not insisted upon a fleet, they might have kept the Anglo-French alliance too weak. Two, number 2 point, is a lot of those, not just manpower, but a lot of the industrial power that built those ships could have built more field howitzers, more large howitzers, for besieging Verdun and whatnot, the fortresses. More machine guns could be bought, more rifles can be bought. So you have a more advanced army. When you do start getting Air Force, you could have more Air Force. So very possibly that initial Schlieffen plan might have worked had you had more railway engines and more preparations to rebuild damaged railroad lines, set up, could be done. So, if all that military spending that's spent on the big fleet, now I'm not saying not to have no fleet, but to have a big fleet, okay, and so you can look at that. Okay, now from Germany in 1939 through 45, what does it need a big fleet for? To threaten the English and make sure the English join with the French? Hitler definitely wants to defeat the French and doesn't mind defeating the expeditionary army of the English to go, yeah, suck it, we win it this time. He wasn't trying to conquer England or Britain or whatever, and the British Empire. He might not care so much if Italy, takes sort of the Mediterranean away from the English, fine, whatever. But India, Africa, Southern Africa, Australia, New Zealand, Hitler's good with Britain being there. Hitler's actually sort of wants that. He doesn't want to collapse Britain. So what does he need these big battleships for? Stupidity, basically. I know the game mechanics have changed. I don't know if we're going to do an invasion of England. How much would a few, because again, I'm going to complete this build out of these, the Admiral Hipper, the Scharnhorst, whatnot class ships. But beyond that, I don't know how useful they're going to be in invading England. In that, are we going to build enough that it's going to matter? Where if we, instead of worrying about building these, would it be better to use the steel and other resources? I don't know how much overlap from the ships, but because I'm not going to build any more naval factories. Oh, we may get some more naval factories from doing a few of the national focuses. Some more dockyards here or something. Trading. We're not going to do the Z plan. So we may get some more, yeah, but I'm not going to build more. Oh, and we may conquer more, but I'm not going to build more. So is it really going to help? Yeah, a few destroyers might, in that if we're just trying to keep, trade, if we go to Norway, trying to keep, supply lines open and suppress British submarines, it might help some destroyers. But are we going, if the British Royal Navy is going to come in strong, shouldn't it just be an air power thing? Shouldn't, if we're going to be able to come here, maybe with the mechanics we need to fight the sea better, but I don't know with the new mechanics really, whether air power and then transports to do an invasion, might that all that we need? Because we're not going to be playing in the Mediterranean. Now, trade interdiction, yeah, some of it I'm looking at it historically, and some of it may be, game mechanics. But doing these, are they really going to do trade interdiction well, better than the submarines, especially once we can build, naval bases out here and have them like the new home port headquarters, have them home ported out here somewhere so that they can range out there. So I'm definitely wanting to do naval to disrupt British operations, whether by sinking ships that are carrying, resources, moving them around, or their ability to. Because if we're not fighting, if we can, and I don't know how the game's going to work out, we're going to see. If is Italy going to go to war with Britain and France? I don't know, maybe. But I'm planning on trying to ignore that as much as possible. So if it just stays its own little war, gets Albania and Greece and Ethiopia and whatnot, and just sort of stay that way, I'm not going to fight down here. So Britain's naval power, all it's really doing is blockading here. As in the idea of trying to trade, whether with U.S. as a neutral nation or Argentina or Brazil or something as neutral nations, to get us what we need. So I don't know that, for my purposes, having a surface navy of a significant size is really going to help. I'm still not sure whether I even want to go into Norway at all. So if we're just talking continental power, submarines, and I don't know with the game, and I haven't even started building more transports, how difficult it will be to do paradrops or naval invasion supported by air power. But that's the most I'm going to do. I'm not sending forces, at least the plans are not to send forces, down to Egypt or somehow, some other places. Whether that means, and again, I don't know current peace mechanisms, whether if I conquer Britain, can I peace it out? Go peace out, guys. We'll give you Britain and England back, but, stay out of the war with our war with the Soviets. So, yeah. Okay. Let's see. What are we looking at? Okay. I think it was the Tripits, rather than Billy, who insisted on a big, heavy BBs either way. Yeah, I don't know enough about the 19th century build up to. Yeah, and surface fleet is useful in Westerbork. And I don't know how much you would need more than what's already, in the plans. So I'm going to complete those ships. I'm mostly just going to I'm going to keep all the dockyards busy just with submarines and transports is my plan. We'll see how it goes. We want 8 and we won't wait. Okay. If you don't contest the Allies, you lose the Baltic coast. Yeah, maybe. We'll see. The chance of success of Sea Lion, you talk of a successful Sea Lion landing, was less than 0. Well, it depends on when you're talking about a Sea Lion landing. When the Germans would have been ready for it, you're absolutely right. But had the Germans had no plans prior or past taking out France. Okay. There were no concrete drawn up plans, as far as I can tell, to take out Britain prior to the French defeat. Okay. Again, as far as I can tell. Now, once, Paris is taken and doing the Versailles Treaty, then they're starting to oh my God, we're still at war with England. They're not piecing out with us. What do we do? And then they're drawing up plans then. And it's not going to be a success in 1940 at that point. It could have been a success in 1941 had they stuck with the building up of the buildup, because they could win the air war. I do think the air war could deny the British surface fleet enough that they could get across the channel. I think it could happen, but it's going to take a major effort. So, yeah, it depends on when and what you're looking at. Just spam tons of light cruisers and more planes. Yeah. I'm going to do lots of planes. The combination between naval and air DDs versus submarines versus air. Yeah, I'm just planning on using air and submarines to try to control the Baltic, as well as some of the surface vessels that we will have, because we do have here in the dockyard the reserve fleet here with the destroyers, the heavy cruiser here, some more heavy cruisers, light cruisers, destroyers, and there's these guys. So we do have some navy. Germany never had a navy that could have held the channel long enough for time to successfully invade. I don't know. There's a lot of presumption in that. I'm not saying you're wrong, because I generally agree with you. But if any of these ministers... Oh, one thing I didn't do and I want to do, I should have done earlier. I should have done this earlier. We're going to create an agency. We're going to call it the Abwehr. And we'll do that for 30 days. I should have done that earlier. I plan to. Okay, here. We've got a fair amount. So I think we're still doing this. I should have maybe done that a little earlier. In hard hiker. Okay, we won here. We're not paying enough attention to the army. To the war in Spain. I don't know what it would have taken. I don't know how well in 41, instead of planning to go do Barbarossa, no Barbarossa anytime in 41. So summer 41, build up the Luftwaffe, because the Luftwaffe is being heavily attrited in its air war against Britain. So it needs to be a bit built up, a bit of a pause, while building up various landing craft. Some of the stuff they were doing were taking, German, Dutch, and other sort of barges and converting them to landing craft and other things like that. Build enough of those, whatever that may mean. Okay, for Mauser, we have Infantry Reliability Plus, Production Efficiency Caps. But I know what these sort of do. I watched the tutorial on it, but I'm far from any sort of expert. These are not mutually exclusive, so hard attack, multi-tank. We'll increase soft attack. I will very much agree with what, in the time frame late 41, late 40, Germany was not ready for it. And when Hitler shifts the attacks from the air attacks from going after Britain's air power to going after Britain's industrial power with primarily nighttime raids, we're just going to make sure we take this all down. I think it's going to maybe be done before we get there, but we're going to make sure we take all that. And part of the reason they switched to the nighttime attacks is, of course, because of the losses to the Luftwaffe. But had they either stayed focused there or been able to truly rule the skies, destroy enough, and they really didn't target, but target the radars and whatnot of that, destroy the RAF as a functional force, and then do daylight invasions, including daylight transits of the canal, so that the Luftwaffe can be there and spot, whether it's light ships, destroyers, that kind of thing, or the heavy battleships coming to interrupt the transit. Spot them well enough and then pound them by the air, from the air. Had they been able to do that, I don't know. I mean, I'm not going to say I'm sure one way or the other. But I think it's a combination of things. One, Hitler is just emotionally not that, anti-English. And for those new around here, I do define, and when I say English, I mean English. Sometimes I say British. Sometimes I say UK, and I'm sort of referring to those as different things. But English, as he would see it. He's not that vehemently anti-English. He sees them as sort of brother nation that we're fighting, but he doesn't want to, necessarily emotionally want to crush. Oh, he'll fight them, but it's not in his, core belief system. Two, it's a warfare that he doesn't understand. Like Napoleon doesn't understand naval warfare, Hitler doesn't understand and is afraid of naval warfare. Oh yeah, sending out the Bismarck or whoever to go raiding, or submarines running around. Yeah, he'll do that, but he doesn't understand the nature of naval war. And I think that's important. Air Force could have stopped the Navy at night until at least 44 or so. The Navy would destroy any support every night, so the German invasion would separate it. That's what I'm saying, is do daylight only crossings either way. Oh yeah, I'm not saying they would be easy, but are you going to try to tell me the battle fighting the English would have been harder than the battle fighting the Soviets? Well, I'm not saying the English wouldn't have fought as hard, and you're definitely talking about some of the home guard plans were nasty. But Germans in 1941, I mean, their air power is massively damaged, and to some degree doesn't recover from the Dutch invasions. They take lots of casualties there, their aircraft. But they still have the best in 1941. And it also takes more damage, even heavier in Crete. The airborne invasion of Crete really guts the transport element of the Luftwaffe. But in 1941, they have the best airlift capability on the planet. Now, obviously, eventually, the Americans have the best airlift, and we can look at even just what they're flying over the hump into China. The amount of aircraft that are flying and supplying China. Not, including everything else. But in 1941, the Germans have the best. So you've got air transport flying material and supplies, because we can look at Stalingrad. Stalingrad fails, and it's not going to succeed with the Luftwaffe flying it in. But two things. One, they're flying over enemy territory that has anti-aircraft guns and all that kind of stuff. And this is actually much, much shorter of a trip. So you've got a shorter trip over neutral territory, the water, unless the British can, have a ship here. It's neutral territory. And if you just run the barges, the resupply, it can be just one way and one day, and then go back the next day. I don't know. I mean, trust me, I see a lot of difficulties. I'm not saying, oh, it would be easy, but are you going to tell me that it's going to be harder than Barbarossa? I mean, Barbarossa fails. It doesn't take Leningrad and it doesn't take Moscow. Stalin is sort of a later. I think it's more their objectives are somewhere around in here for Barbarossa. The actual summer offensive, not just, what they're going to take of the Soviet Union. So it fails. It doesn't get Moscow. It doesn't get Leningrad. Now, they sit outside of Leningrad for much of the war, but they get pushed back from there. But you're going to tell me that if Russia stays peaceful, big if, that all of the Luftwaffe concentrated here in 41, let the Italians do whatever the fuck, because it doesn't matter. Because if you take London and you take England, it really doesn't matter what's going on out here. This only matters if, and I'm looking at real world World War II, not maybe what we're planning. But this only matters here if England still, is independent. And if you can take England out prior to the Americans coming into the war, you got to be super stupid or super ignorant, maybe, because Hitler is not stupid. But you've got to be sort of, not learning the lessons from history, like we talked about. If the Americans don't want to be involved, don't poke them, okay? Don't poke us. Please, please. Iran, should have just had your little revolution. And once you happen, don't demand to get the Shah back and going to hold hostages. You just should have said, fine, here are the Americans. Go home. America, go home. And just not mess with America. Venezuela, if you want to spiral into communist chaos, fine. Don't set up a whole trafficking system where you're facilitating tons, literally tons, not just figuratively, literally tons of drugs being flowed into the United States. Don't flood America with insurgents, because they do. If you don't, Trende de Agua or whatever, TDA and others, those are an insurgent movement. Now they're just gangs, criminals. No, they're an insurgent movement that is supported out of Venezuela. Don't send a bunch of insurgents. Wreck your own country. Yeah, I know you're nationalizing American assets, because all of these oil fields out here, who builds them? America builds them. Oh, Venezuelans, yeah, they work on it. But all the industrial equipment is not built in Venezuela. It's built in America. And until Hugo Chavez gets in power, Venezuela is one of the richest per capita. Not just richest because it's, sitting on some valuable asset like the Panama Canal or something, but richest per capita countries in Latin America. It's doing pretty damn good. Yeah, there's poor people, but overall it's doing pretty damn good. But you gotta poke America. Don't poke America. We probably won't invade you. Okay? We probably won't invade you. We might still, but probably not. So that's the thing. So had you knocked Britain out in 1941, before Japan decides to attack Pearl Harbor, that would have just been an American-Japanese war, because there was not enough impetus to, to go to war with Germany, especially if Britain is, now we can do it. We're going to do tote just 14 days. We'll get this going. Now, here we are. Okay. Armor technology for Henschel. Okay. State 4. Okay, we could do Henschel facilities, production output, more. I've got to learn this in detail, but I'm looking at here, breakthrough. Production output looks like it may be the best thing to do early. Because it just, let's do that. Okay, we're doing Reichsleiter. Tote. Oh, doctor. Let's make a save here. I want to thank Dutovlich, Arno, Bustar, Folk, Thomas, some Eastern European named Kovic. I'm butchering, I don't mean to. Guys who come up with really good points. ZZ, Sparkle Tarts, I guess. I don't know. Who else here? Keck. I'm going to thank you all for hanging out with me today. Enjoyed the conversation that we've had back and forth. I think I already said thanks to ZZ and Arno. Soul the Civ guy, if you're still around, thanks for hanging out. Kronos, thanks for the warning about the bad titling of the game. Yeah, thank you for hanging out with me. Remember to subscribe, like, and follow either on YouTube, or it says live both on YouTube and Twitch. Thank you so much. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. Pacific time, we should be starting playing War Thunder. If you want to come in, you just hang out with us. You can decide if you want to play. We'll try. I mean, if it's just like the last match or two, I may not bring you in. But if you try to rotate people in and out to some degree, if there's more than 4 or 3 people that want to join me, we'll mostly drive World War II tanks. And yeah, do that on Sundays. And I am streaming on Slitherine TV. I think it's Slitherine TV or it's Matrix TV or whatever. But Slitherine TV, the post-apocalyptic game, whatever it is, on Slitherine TV on Monday. Because I also stream over there for them. But that, and then of course back next weekend. Just do this on the weekends currently. Yeah, same normal time tomorrow. It should be World War Thunder. So yeah, so hopefully to see you guys then. So thanks so much. Calling it a day here. Had fun. So hope you guys did too. So thanks everyone. See you next time.